The winter moon cast its silver light upon the ancient stones of Northcrest Castle, where King Magnus Blackthorn stood alone on the highest tower. 400 years of life had carved deep lines into his face, each one a testament to battles fought and sacrifices made. His powerful frame remained unbowed by centuries, wrapped now in a midnight cloak that billowed in the bitter wind. Upon his head rested the wolf crown, forged from black iron and adorned with 7 wolf heads, their ruby eyes gleaming with an unnatural light. Magnus reached up with weathered hands and touched the crown, feeling the familiar burn against his fingertips. 4 centuries of wearing this burden, and still the pain never lessened. The crown could not be removed, not by him, not by anyone, without unleashing devastation upon the kingdom. He was bound to it as surely as he was bound to the throne. Far below, the once fertile lands of Northcrest spread out like a withered corpse. Where lush forests and golden fields had once thrived, now only barren soil and twisted trees remained. Villages that had bustled with life now stood half empty, their inhabitants fleeing the creeping decay that had plagued the land for generations. All of it, every dying acre and abandoned home, was the price of his immortality. "Another nightmare, Your Majesty?" The voice belonged to Alaric, his steward for the past 60 years, a mere blink in Magnus's long existence. The same one. Magnus did not turn from the view. Malaran, the battle, the moment I took his head and felt the curse take hold. 200 years had passed since that fateful day, when Magnus had faced the great sorcerer Malaran on the fields of Ashenfell. The battle had raged for 3 days and 3 nights, until at last Magnus's blade had severed the sorcerer's head from his body. With his dying breath, Malaran had uttered the curse that would bind itself to the wolf crown and to the 7 alpha spirits contained within. "You saved the kingdom," Alaric said. "Without your victory, there would be no Northcrest at all." Magnus finally turned, his golden eyes reflecting the moonlight. "I saved it then, only to watch it die slowly now. Some victory." The pain struck without warning, as it always did. Magnus staggered, one hand grasping the stone battlement as the crown seemed to tighten around his skull. Inside his mind, 7 voices howled in unison. The alpha spirits, ancient and powerful, bound to the crown and to him. They hungered for blood, for conquest, for the days when the wolf kingdom had stretched across the continent. The agony passed, leaving Magnus breathing heavily. These attacks grew stronger each year, the 7 spirits more restless. Soon he feared their influence would overwhelm his own will. And what then for his people? "The council awaits below," Alaric said quietly, pretending not to have noticed the king's moment of weakness. "Alpha Roland has reports of increased rogue activity on the western borders." "Roland?" Magnus almost spat the name. "The man has never seen a battlefield, yet he presumes to advise me on military matters." "He is head of the Alpha Council," Alaric reminded him, "and every day he dreams of wearing my crown." Magnus straightened, composing himself. "Tell them I will join shortly, and Alaric, bring the historic accounts of Soul Keepers, all of them." The steward's eyes widened fractionally before he regained his composure. "Soul Keepers, Your Majesty? Those are but legends, tales told to wolf pups. Every legend contains a seed of truth." Magnus gazed out again at his dying kingdom. "And I have lived long enough to know that sometimes legends are our only hope." After Alaric departed, Magnus closed his eyes, allowing his enhanced senses to spread across his domain. He felt the pulse of every wolf in his territory, from the nobles in their comfortable manners to the commoners struggling against hunger in the villages. But more concerning were the growing bands of rogues, wolves who had abandoned pack structure, giving in to their most savage instincts. Their numbers increased as the land died, as hunger and desperation drove once loyal subjects to abandon civilization. And beneath it all, Magnus sensed something else, a faint stirring, like a heartbeat awakening after centuries of slumber, something ancient, something powerful, something that might save them all, or destroy what little remained. The small village of Silveridge clung to the boundaries of Northcrest like a beggar to a nobleman's cloak, desperate, tenuous, and largely ignored. Perched where the civilized lands gave way to the wild territories, it served as the final outpost before the ominous expanse of the Shadowfall forest. Here, in the dusty confines of the Broken Fang Tavern, Serafina Hayes wiped down tables and avoided the stares of the local wolves. At 28, she had long grown accustomed to their contempt. Half human, half wolf, she belonged fully to neither world. Her inability to shift marked her as defective among wolves, while her unnaturally keen senses and strength set her apart from humans. Silveridge tolerated her presence only because Martha, the tavern owner, had taken pity on the orphaned girl 20 years ago. "Oh, child." "Another round for the Rangers," Martha called from behind the bar, nodding toward a rowdy table of border guards. Serafina collected the empty mugs, keeping her gaze lowered. One of the Rangers, a bulky wolf named Darius, deliberately stretched his leg into her path. She stepped over it without comment. "What's wrong, half-breed? Too good to look a real wolf in the eye?" Darius's words slurred slightly from the ale. Serafina continued to the bar, where Martha filled fresh mugs with amber liquid. The old woman's eyes, still sharp despite her 70 years, flicked toward the troublesome table. "Ignore them," she murmured. "Royal Guards arrived this morning. Everyone's on edge." Serafina nodded, taking the tray. Royal Guards in Silveridge meant only one thing: another collection. Periodically, King Magnus's council sent troops to the border villages to gather resources, timber, crops, and occasionally people. Young wolves for the army, skilled craftsmen for the capital, and increasingly half-bloods like her for the mysterious new settlement. No one who went to this settlement ever returned. She delivered the drinks to the Rangers' table, setting them down without a word. As she turned to leave, Darius caught her wrist, his grip tight enough to bruise. "I asked you a question, half-breed." Serafina felt the familiar heat rise in her chest, anger mingled with fear. Beneath her worn shirt, pressed against her skin, the emerald fragment grew warm, as it always did when her emotions ran high. The small crystal shard, her only inheritance from her mother, seemed alive sometimes, responding to her moods. "Please release me," she said quietly, her voice steady despite the rage building inside. Darius grinned, revealing teeth too sharp for his human form. "Or what? You'll shed your skin and show me your wolf? Oh, wait." His companions laughed. "That's enough." The new voice cut through the tavern noise like a blade. A tall figure stood in the doorway, wearing the silver insignia of the Royal Guard. Captain Thorne surveyed the room with cold detachment, his gaze finally settling on Darius's hand, still gripping Serafina's wrist. "Release the woman." Darius dropped her arm as if burned. "Captain Thorne, we were just having some fun with the local half-breed." Thorne's expression remained impassive. "Fun is a luxury for those who've completed their duties. I don't recall authorizing you to abandon your post at the western checkpoint." The Rangers scrambled to their feet, suddenly sober. They tossed coins onto the table and hurried out, avoiding the captain's stern gaze. Serafina retreated behind the bar, rubbing her wrist. The emerald fragment pulsed against her skin, uncomfortably hot now. Thorne approached the bar, removing his gloves with deliberate precision. "Martha Hayes, it's been some time." Martha nodded stiffly. 15 years, Captain. Not long enough." A ghost of a smile touched Thorne's lips. "Still bitter about the conscription of 10? Your son serves the crown with distinction." "If he lives," Martha replied. "We wouldn't know. No letters come this far from the capital anymore." Thorne's gaze shifted to Serafina, his nostrils flaring slightly as he caught her scent. "And this must be the human girl you took in, except—" His eyes narrowed. "Not entirely human, is she?" Martha moved protectively in front of Serafina. "State your business, Captain. The Council's quarterly tribute has already been collected." "This isn't about tribute." Thorne placed a scroll on the counter, bearing the royal seal. "By decree of the Alpha Council, all half-bloods are to be relocated to the new settlement immediately, for their own protection." The tavern fell silent. Serafina felt cold dread settle in her stomach. The emerald burned against her skin, almost painfully now. "There are no half-bloods here," Martha said firmly. Thorne's gaze never left Serafina. "Don't insult my senses, Martha. I can smell the mixed blood from across the room." He nodded to 2 guards who had entered behind him. "Take her." "Wait." Serafina stepped around Martha, meeting Thorne's gaze directly. "There are others, families with children. Give me until dawn to say my goodbyes." Thorne studied her for a long moment. "Until midnight, not a moment longer. And if you attempt to flee—" He left the threat unspoken. After the guards departed, Martha grabbed Serafina's shoulders. "You're not going. We'll hide you in the root cellar." And what about the Jensen family, or old Caleb, or the twin boys at the Smiths? Seraphina shook her head. I won't hide while they're taken. Martha's weathered face crumpled. They'll send you to the Moonstone mines. No one survives there more than a year. Then I have a year to find a way out. Seraphina touched the small bulge beneath her shirt where the emerald fragment lay. Mother always said I was meant for something more. Perhaps this is the path to discovering what that is. Martha pulled her into a fierce embrace. Your mother was the strongest woman I ever knew. She defied the pack law to love your father, and she faced the consequences without regret. She pulled back, eyes bright with unshed tears. You have her spirit. Help me warn the others, Seraphina said. We need to get the children out before midnight. As the afternoon sun cast long shadows across Silver Edge, Seraphina moved swiftly from house to house, warning the half-blood families. The Jensen family, with their 3 young children, agreed to flee immediately, heading south toward the human territories. Old Caleb, too frail to run, resigned himself to the new settlement, packing his few belongings with dignity. At the blacksmith's shop, Seraphina found 13-year-old twins Eli and Finn working the bellows. Their father, a full-blooded wolf who had married a human woman, listened grimly to Seraphina's warning. We've been expecting this, he said, his massive hands clenched into fists. Ever since their mother died last winter. Take the boys. I've prepared a pack with supplies. He pressed a small pouch of coins into Seraphina's hand. Get them across the border if you can. And you? She asked, though she already knew the answer. I'll buy you time. The captain knows me. I served in the Royal Army before settling here. He'll listen long enough for you to get a head start. The twins protested, but their father silenced them with a look. You are my legacy. Live free, my sons. As dusk fell, Seraphina led a small group through the back alleys of Silver Edge. The twins, an elderly couple too determined to be left behind, and a young pregnant woman whose wolf husband had been taken in the last conscription. They moved toward the southern edge of the village, where the dense underbrush of Shadowfall Forest would provide cover. Once inside the forest, stay on the old hunter's path until you reach the fork, Seraphina instructed, handing out the small packs of provisions she and Martha had hastily assembled. Take the eastern branch. After 3 days' journey, you'll reach the human settlement of Crossroads. Find a man named Tobias at the livery stable. Show him this. She handed the pregnant woman a small wooden token carved with Martha's family symbol. He'll help you. You're not coming with us? Eli asked, his young face confused. Seraphina shook her head. I need to make sure everyone gets away safely. I'll follow later. The lie came easily to her lips. A sudden howl pierced the twilight air, then another. The royal guards had discovered the empty homes. Go! Seraphina urged, pushing them toward the tree line. Now! As the refugees disappeared into the shadowy forest, Seraphina turned back toward the village. She had promised to create a diversion, to draw attention away from their escape. The emerald fragment pulsed against her skin, seeming to approve of her decision. She had taken only a few steps when a powerful hand grabbed her arm, spinning her around. Captain Thorne loomed over her, his face a mask of cold fury. Where are they? He demanded. Safe from you, she spat. The blow came without warning, knocking her to the ground. Thorne stood over her, his form wavering as his wolf nature pushed against his human shell. Roland will have your hide for this interference, he growled. Bring her, he commanded to the guards who had materialized from the shadows. Strong hands hauled Seraphina to her feet. As they dragged her toward the village square, she caught glimpses of other half-bloods being rounded up, those too old, too young, or too frightened to flee. Among them was Martha, her face bloody, but her gaze defiant. In the square, a man Seraphina didn't recognize sat astride a massive black stallion. Unlike the guards, he wore no armor, only fine robes of deep crimson embroidered with gold. His face was handsome in a cold, precise way, and his eyes gleamed with intelligence and cruelty. Counselor Roland, Thorne announced, pushing Seraphina forward. This one organized an escape attempt. Several half-bloods have fled into Shadowfall. Roland dismounted gracefully, approaching Seraphina with the casual confidence of a predator who knows its prey cannot escape. Indeed? He circled her slowly, inhaling her scent. Fascinating. A half-blood with the audacity to defy the crown. The crown didn't order this, Seraphina said. King Magnus has always protected all his subjects, regardless of blood. Roland laughed, the sound devoid of humor. The king is a relic, living in the past. The future belongs to pure bloodlines. He reached out, tilting her chin up with one finger. But you might prove useful. The Moonstone mines always need strong backs. "Take me," Martha called out. "Leave her be. She's just a foolish girl." Roland's attention shifted to the older woman. "Ah, the tavern keeper. I remember you. Your son serves in my personal guard." His smile widened. Or rather, he did. Unfortunate accident during training last month. Martha's anguished cry cut through the night air. She lunged toward Roland, but guards restrained her. "Take this one to the special transport," Roland ordered, nodding toward Serafina, "and put the old woman with the others." As the guards dragged them in opposite directions, Serafina locked eyes with Martha one last time. The older woman's lips moved silently, forming words Serafina had heard countless times throughout her childhood. "Remember who you are." The special transport proved to be a reinforced wagon with iron bars and silver-infused restraints, equipment designed to contain full-blooded wolves, not half-breeds like her. Serafina was thrown inside, her wrists bound with silver chains that burned slightly against her skin. Through the bars, she watched as other half-bloods were loaded into ordinary wagons. Children cried for parents. Elderly couples clung to each other, all facing an uncertain fate in the mysterious new settlement. As night fell, the temperature dropped. Serafina huddled in a corner of the wagon, trying to conserve warmth. The emerald fragment against her chest grew increasingly hot, as if attempting to counteract the cold. She closed her eyes, thinking of her mother, a woman she barely remembered, who had died when Serafina was only 8, a woman who had left her nothing but the crystal shard and cryptic words, "When the time comes, you'll know." A shadow fell across the wagon. Serafina looked up to see Roland standing there, accompanied by a tall, thin man in dark robes. "This is the one, Malachi," Roland said. "Her scent is unusual." The robed man, Malachi, leaned closer to the bars. In the moonlight, his face appeared gaunt, almost skeletal, with deep-set eyes that gleamed with an unnatural violet light. "Half-blood, certainly," he murmured, "but something more, something old." He reached a bony hand through the bars. "Come closer, girl." Serafina pressed herself against the far side of the wagon. "Stay away from me." Malachi's thin lips curved into a smile. "Defiant. Interesting." He withdrew his hand. "The mines will break that spirit soon enough. Or perhaps—" He turned to Roland. "Perhaps she would be more valuable in my laboratory. The old texts speak of half-bloods with unique properties. You'll have your specimens, Malachi, once we've extracted sufficient moonstone for the ritual." Roland glanced at Serafina. "This one goes to the mines. I want to see how long she lasts." As they walked away, Serafina caught fragments of their conversation. "The alignment approaches. King grows suspicious. Crown must be transferred before." Their voices faded into the night, leaving Serafina alone with her fear. The emerald fragment burned hotter still, almost painfully so. She tugged at her shirt collar, pulling the crystal out to examine it in the moonlight. To her shock, the shard glowed with an internal light, pulsing in rhythm with her heartbeat. As she watched, mesmerized, tiny symbols appeared on its surface, ancient runes that seemed to shift and change as she tried to focus on them. "What are you?" she whispered. The wagon lurched suddenly as someone climbed onto the driver's seat. A burly man with a scarred face peered through the front grating. "Comfortable half-breed?" he sneered. "Enjoy it while you can. 2 weeks' journey to the mines, then you'll never see the sky again." Serafina tucked the crystal back into her shirt. "What happens at the mines?" she asked, hoping to extract information. "You dig until you die." The driver laughed. "Simple enough, even for your kind." "And what are you mining?" The driver hesitated, then apparently decided no harm could come from telling a condemned prisoner. "Moonstone. Powerful stuff. Amplifies magic, especially on wolf kind." He tapped his temple. "Makes us stronger, faster, more wolf than man. Council needs it for the ritual." "What ritual?" "Enough questions." He turned away, preparing the wagon for departure. Serafina's mind raced. Moonstone was legendary, a crystalline substance said to form only where moonlight had touched the same spot for 1,000 years. Ancient texts described its power to enhance wolf abilities, but also its dangerous side effects: increased aggression, diminished humanity, eventual madness. And now Roland was stockpiling it. The emerald burned against her skin as understanding dawned. Not a ritual to serve the king, but to overthrow him. A coup using moonstone-enhanced soldiers loyal to Roland. The driver climbed down to check the wagon's locks one final time. As he reached for the rear door, Serafina acted on instinct. She lunged forward, grabbing his arm through the bars and pulling him hard against the wagon. "Hey!" he shouted, struggling to break free. "Guards!" Serafina felt something rising within her, a power she'd never known, radiating outward from the emerald fragment. Heat flooded her veins, and her vision sharpened until she could count the individual hairs in the driver's beard. Strength surged through her muscles as she tightened her grip on his arm. "What the—" The driver's eyes widened in terror as he looked into her face. "Your eyes! What are you?" Serafina didn't understand his fear until she caught her reflection in the polished metal of the wagon lock. Her eyes, normally hazel, now glowed emerald green with vertical pupils like a wolf's. The silver chains around her wrists suddenly felt unbearably hot. With a cry of pain and rage, she pulled against them. Metal links that should have restrained a full-grown alpha wolf stretched and then shattered. "Guards!" the driver screamed. "She's breaking free!" Serafina grabbed him by the throat, squeezing until his cries turned to gurgles. Part of her was horrified by her own actions, but a deeper, newly awakened part exulted in the power coursing through her body. "Where is the key?" she demanded. The driver fumbled at his belt, producing a heavy iron key. Serafina snatched it from his trembling fingers and released her grip. He collapsed, gasping for air. She unlocked the wagon door and stepped out into the night. 2 guards came running, swords drawn. Serafina felt no fear, only a strange, detached curiosity about what she might be capable of now. The first guard swung his blade in a downward arc. Moving with impossible speed, Serafina sidestepped the attack and drove her palm into his chest. The impact lifted him off his feet and sent him crashing into the side of the wagon, where he slumped, motionless. The second guard hesitated, then charged with a battle cry. Serafina caught his sword arm, twisted, and felt bones snap beneath her grip. His scream cut off abruptly as she delivered a blow to his temple, dropping him unconscious beside his companion. More shouts rang out across the village square. Torchlight approached as additional guards responded to the commotion. Serafina knew she couldn't fight them all. She needed to flee, and there was only one direction where pursuit would hesitate to follow: Shadowfall Forest. She sprinted toward the tree line, her enhanced speed carrying her faster than any human could run. Behind her, she heard Roland's voice raised in fury, ordering the guards to find her at any cost. The emerald fragment pulsed against her skin, guiding her like a compass toward the heart of the forest. Legend said Shadowfall was haunted by ancient spirits, that wolves who entered never returned. Tonight, Serafina would test those legends. The deeper she ran into Shadowfall, the stranger the forest became. Ancient trees with trunks wider than village houses reached toward the sky, their branches intertwining to block out moonlight. Bioluminescent fungi cast an eerie blue glow across the forest floor, illuminating paths that seemed to shift and change when not observed directly. After what felt like hours of running, Serafina's strength began to wane. The emerald's glow dimmed, and with it, her enhanced abilities receded. Exhaustion swept through her body like a physical blow. She stumbled, caught herself against a tree trunk, and slowly slid to the ground. The sounds of pursuit had faded long ago, but new noises surrounded her. Rustling movements in the underbrush, soft padding of feet on loamy soil, the occasional snap of twigs under careful weight. She was being watched, stalked from all sides. "Show yourselves!" she called, her voice hoarse from exertion. The forest fell silent for a heartbeat. Then, as if materializing from the shadows themselves, wolves appeared. Not ordinary wolves, these creatures stood larger than any natural wolf, with muscular shoulders that reached the height of a man's chest. Their fur gleamed silver in the fungal light, and their eyes— Serafina gasped. Their eyes glowed emerald green, identical to what she had glimpsed of her own transformed gaze. The pack formed a circle around her, neither attacking nor retreating. At some unspoken signal, they parted to allow another wolf to approach, this one larger than the rest, with a streak of white fur running from between his ears down his spine. Serafina held perfectly still as the alpha wolf approached. He stopped mere inches from her face, his breath warm against her skin. Those intelligent green eyes studied her with unmistakable purpose. Then, to her astonishment, the wolf bowed its massive head. One by one, the entire pack followed suit, lowering their heads in what could only be interpreted as deference or recognition. "I don't understand," Serafina whispered. A soft voice spoke from the darkness beyond the wolf pack. "They recognize what you are, even if you do not." An elderly woman stepped into the clearing, leaning on a staff carved from pale wood. Despite her apparent age, she moved with the fluid grace of a predator. Her silver hair hung in a long braid over one shoulder, and her eyes, the same emerald green as the wolves', regarded Serafina with knowing intensity. "Who are you?" Serafina asked, rising unsteadily to her feet. "I am Elena, elder of the Silver Mist Pack." The woman approached, the wolves making way for her. "And you, child, are something we thought lost to the world forever." "I don't know what you mean." Elena smiled, the expression transforming her weathered face. "No, you wouldn't. Those who should have taught you are long gone." She reached out, her fingertips brushing the spot where the emerald fragment lay beneath Serafina's shirt. "But the heart remembers, and it has chosen you." "The heart?" "The Soul Keeper's heart. A crystal of immense power, shattered long ago to prevent its misuse." Elena's eyes gleamed. "You carry a fragment passed down through your bloodline, waiting for one strong enough to awaken it." Serafina touched the crystal through her shirt. "My mother gave this to me before she died. She said I'd understand when the time came. And that time is now." Elena gestured to the wolves around them. "These are the ancient ones, the first wolves, uncorrupted by human form or politics. They've been waiting for a soul keeper to return." "Soul keeper?" The term stirred something in Serafina's memory. Bedtime stories Martha had told, legends of wolf speakers who could calm the rage of alphas and heal the madness of rogues. "One who balances the power of the alpha," Elena explained. "Where alphas command, soul keepers harmonize. Where alphas destroy, soul keepers create." She pointed to the fragment. "That shard recognized the potential in you, lying dormant in your mixed blood. Tonight, when your need was greatest, it awakened." Serafina's legs gave way beneath her as the implications crashed through her mind. The stories were real. The legends had basis in fact, and somehow, impossibly, she was part of them. Elena knelt beside her, surprisingly spry for her apparent age. "Rest now. You're safe here. When you've recovered your strength, there is much to learn and even more at stake than you realize." As Serafina's consciousness faded, her last sight was of the wolves settling in a protective circle around her, their eyes gleaming like emerald stars in the darkness. She dreamed of a crown with 7 wolf heads, of ruby eyes that burned with hunger, and of a king trapped in eternal torment. And through it all, the emerald fragment pulsed against her heart, singing an ancient song of balance restored and power reclaimed. In the heart of Shadowfall Forest, an ancient temple rose from the misty ground like the skeleton of a forgotten god. Constructed not of quarried stone, but of living trees that had grown into archways and chambers over millennia, the Temple of the Soul Keeper breathed with its own slow rhythm. Serafina followed Elena through corridors formed by intertwining branches, marveling at the otherworldly beauty. Sunlight filtered through canopies of leaves, casting dappled patterns across moss-covered floors. The ancient ones, the wolf pack that had surrounded her the night before, padded silently alongside, their powerful bodies fluid as water. "This place," Serafina struggled to find words. "It feels alive." "It is," Elena confirmed. "The temple grows as the forest grows, shaped by generations of soul keepers. Or it did, before they were hunted to extinction." They entered a central chamber where the trees formed a perfect circle, their branches reaching upward to create a natural dome. In the center stood an altar of white stone, its surface carved with intricate symbols similar to those Serafina had glimpsed on her emerald fragment. Elena gestured for her to approach. "Place your fragment on the altar." Serafina hesitated, suddenly reluctant to part with the crystal that had been her constant companion since childhood. "What will happen?" "The temple will recognize you and reveal what you need to know." Elena's expression softened. "I understand your fear. I felt the same when I first came here." "You're a soul keeper too?" Elena's smile turned sad. I was born with the potential, as you were, but I never completed the awakening ritual. I chose a different path. She nodded toward the altar. Now I guide others when they appear, though you are the first in over 50 years. Serafina slowly removed the leather cord from around her neck, letting the emerald fragment dangle above the altar. The crystal seemed to pulse more rapidly as it neared the stone's surface, its glow intensifying. "Why were soul keepers hunted?" she asked, still holding the fragment suspended. "Power," Elena replied simply. Soul keepers represent balance, a check on alpha dominance. Some alphas welcome this balance, understanding that unchecked power leads to corruption. Others, her voice hardened, others saw only a threat to their absolute authority. Serafina lowered the fragment onto the altar. The moment it touched the stone, a flash of emerald light blinded her. When her vision cleared, the chamber had transformed. The walls of living wood now displayed moving images, like memories given physical form. She saw magnificent cities where wolves and humans lived in harmony. She witnessed soul keepers working alongside alpha leaders, their combined powers creating prosperity and peace. Then came darker images, a power-hungry alpha slaughtering his soul keeper, assuming both roles and descending into madness. War spreading across the land, alphas turning on soul keepers everywhere, hunting them to near extinction. Finally, she saw 7 great alpha warriors gathering in council, combining their powers to forge a crown that would unite their strengths. The wolf crown, designed to be balanced by 7 soul keepers working in concert. But the soul keepers had grown too few, too weak, too hunted. The crown's power remained unchecked, corrupting its wearers over generations, until a sorcerer named Maloran cast a final curse, binding the 7 alpha spirits permanently to the crown. The vision shifted to a battlefield, where a younger Magnus Blackthorn, still recognizable despite the intervening centuries, faced Maloran in combat. She witnessed Magnus's victory, saw him take the sorcerer's head, and felt the curse transfer to the crown, binding itself and the 7 alpha spirits to Magnus for eternity. The images faded, returning the chamber to its natural state. Serafina gasped for breath, feeling as though she'd lived through centuries in mere minutes. "Now you understand," Elena said quietly. "The wolf crown was never meant to be worn by one alone. It requires balance, alpha power tempered by soul keeper wisdom. And Magnus has worn it alone for 200 years. Serafina's heart ached for the torment she had glimpsed in the vision. "The spirits within the crown are consuming him." Elena nodded. "The crown cannot be removed, cannot be destroyed, not by any ordinary means. Only a fully awakened Prime Soul Keeper, wielding the complete heart, might stand a chance." Prime Soul Keeper? The rarest of Soul Keepers, born perhaps once in a generation, one who can channel the power of all 7 original Soul Keeper bloodlines. Elena's gaze grew intense. "The fragment you carry is from the Prime bloodline. The visions have confirmed what I suspected. You have the potential to become a Prime." Serafina stared at the emerald fragment, still glowing on the altar. "But you said the heart was shattered." "Into 7 pieces, 1 for each bloodline. Most were lost over time, as soul keepers were hunted down. But rumors persist of fragments hidden away, protected by those loyal to the old ways. And if all fragments were united, then a Prime Soul Keeper could awaken fully." Elena's voice dropped to a near whisper, "and perhaps break the curse that binds Magnus to the crown." Serafina thought of the dying kingdom she had glimpsed in her vision, of villages emptying as the land withered, of half-bloods being rounded up for slave labor in moonstone mines, of Roland and Malachi's mysterious plans. "There's more at stake than just the curse, isn't there?" she asked. Elena signaled, and one of the ancient ones, a sleek female with gray-silver fur, approached the altar. The wolf's form blurred, shifted, changed in a fluid motion that seemed both impossible and entirely natural. Where the wolf had stood, a woman now knelt, naked but unashamed, her silver-gray hair cascading over her shoulders. "This is Lyra, my second," Elena explained. "She brings news from beyond Shadowfall." Lyra rose gracefully. When she spoke, her voice carried the hint of a growl. "The Alpha Council moves against the king. They mine moonstone in quantities never before seen, using half-blood slaves who die by the dozens. Rumors speak of a ritual planned for the next blood moon, 16 days hence." What ritual? Serafina asked. One to transfer the wolf crown from Magnus to a new host, Elena answered grimly. Roland seeks to become the new eternal Alpha with Malachi's assistance. But the crown is bound to Magnus. It cannot be removed while he lives. Even as Serafina spoke, horrible understanding dawned. They mean to kill him. Not easily accomplished when one is immortal, Lyra observed. But Malachi is descendant of Maloran himself. He has studied the curse for 2 centuries, seeking a way to break one aspect while preserving the power. Serafina's mind raced. The Moonstone. They'll use it to temporarily sever Magnus's connection to the crown without breaking the curse itself. Elena nodded, approval in her eyes. You understand quickly. Yes, in sufficient quantity, Moonstone can disrupt magical bonds temporarily, long enough perhaps for a ritual of transference. And then Roland would wear the crown, with all its power and none of its balance. Serafina shuddered at the thought. The 7 alpha spirits would consume him even faster than they're consuming Magnus, turning him into a monster with unprecedented power. Precisely why we must complete your awakening ritual immediately, Elena said. The emerald fragment has recognized you, but your powers are unstable, awakened by desperation rather than proper ceremony. She gestured to the altar, which had begun to transform, the white stone flowing like water until it formed a shallow basin. Clear liquid welled up from within, filling the depression. The waters of awakening, Elena explained, drawn from the deepest roots of the temple trees, infused with the essence of countless soul-keepers who came before. Lyra approached with a silver knife, its blade inscribed with the same ancient symbols as the altar. Your blood must mingle with the waters, she said. The pain is momentary, the transformation eternal. Serafina hesitated. And if I refuse? If I run from this destiny? Then you doom not only yourself, but Magnus, the kingdom, and perhaps all wolf-kind, Elena said bluntly. Roland must be stopped. The crown must be balanced. You are our only hope. Serafina thought of Martha, likely already on her way to the Moonstone mines, of the Jensen family and the blacksmith's twins fleeing toward an uncertain future, of villages slowly dying as the land withered under an unbalanced crown. She extended her palm toward Lyra. Do it. The knife flashed silver in the dappled light. Serafina gasped as the blade bit deep across her palm, blood welling up bright red. She held her hand over the basin, watching as droplets of her blood fell into the clear water, creating swirling patterns of crimson that gradually dissolved. Elena lifted the emerald fragment from the altar and placed it in the bloodied water. Immediately, the liquid began to glow with the same verdant light as the crystal, the illumination growing until the entire chamber was bathed in emerald radiance. Drink, Elena commanded. Serafina cupped her wounded hand, lifting the glowing liquid to her lips. It tasted of earth and moonlight, of ancient forests and primal power. As it slid down her throat, heat bloomed in her chest, radiating outward through her limbs. Her vision blurred, then sharpened beyond human capacity. Her hearing expanded until she could detect the heartbeats of small creatures burrowing far beneath the temple floor. Scents assaulted her nose, the rich loam of the forest, the distinct identities of each ancient one watching the ceremony, the lingering aroma of magic performed in this chamber over countless generations. But most profound was the sense of connection that flooded through her consciousness. She felt the life force of every tree in Shadowfall, every wolf in Elena's pack, every bird soaring above the canopy. And beyond the forest, like distant stars in her awareness, the presences of thousands of wolves across Northcrest, their joys and sorrows, their hunger and contentment, all flowing into her mind in a symphony of sensation. Brightest among these distant presences was a singular point of power that blazed like a bonfire in her perception. A being of immense strength, aged by centuries yet still vital, carrying a burden that would have crushed any lesser creature. Magnus, the king, the eternal Alpha. And within him, writhing like serpents of flame, the 7 alpha spirits bound to the wolf crown. Serafina gasped as her awareness was violently pulled back into her physical body. She found herself on her knees before the altar, Elena and Lyra supporting her on either side. The awakening has begun, Elena said, her voice seeming to come from a great distance. Your powers will grow stronger as you learn to control them, but time is short. I felt him, Serafina whispered. Magnus, the crown is killing him. Yes, and he has sensed you in return. Elena helped her to her feet. Even now he will be wondering what new power has awakened in his kingdom. As if in confirmations of her words, a howl rose from the forest beyond the temple. Not the cry of the Ancient Ones, but a different voice, carrying authority and command. Then another joined it, and another. Lyra shifted partially, her face elongating into a wolf's muzzle to enhance her sense of smell. "Royal guards," she growled, "a full hunting party entering Shadowfall." "So soon?" Elena looked troubled. "Roland must have informants in the forest borderlands." "No," Seraphina said, certainty filling her. "Not Roland. Magnus himself leads them. I can feel his presence drawing closer." She touched the emerald fragment, now glowing brighter than ever, returned to its place against her heart. He feels the awakening of a soulkeeper and comes to see for himself. Elena and Lyra exchanged alarmed glances. "You are not ready to face him," Elena warned. "Your powers are newly awakened, untrained." "But this may be our only chance," Seraphina argued, "before Roland can complete his plan. If Magnus truly leads this hunting party, I must speak with him, tell him what we know." "Or he may kill you on sight," Lyra countered. "Alphas have hunted soulkeepers for generations. Old hatreds run deep." Another howl sounded, closer now. The Ancient Ones grew restless, pacing the chamber with hackles raised. Seraphina closed her eyes, extending her newfound senses toward the approaching presence. She felt power, yes, and wariness, but not hatred or bloodlust. Curiosity drove Magnus forward more than aggression. "I must try," she decided, opening her eyes. "Help me prepare to meet him." Elena studied her face, then nodded slowly. "Very well, but not here in the temple. The Ancient Ones will lead you to the moonlit clearing, sacred neutral ground since before the wolf crown was forged. There, neither Alpha nor Soulkeeper holds advantage over the other." As Elena spoke, the white-streaked alpha wolf who had first approached Seraphina the night before padded forward, green eyes intent. "Storm will guide you," Elena said. "Trust his judgment." Seraphina knelt before the massive wolf. "I am honored by your protection," she said formally, instinctively knowing the proper words. Storm dipped his head in acknowledgement, then turned toward one of the temple exits, looking back expectantly. "We will follow at a distance," Elena promised, "but this first meeting must be yours alone. The prophecy demands it." "Prophecy?" Seraphina asked, but Elena merely smiled enigmatically. "Go now. Magnus approaches swiftly. Do not keep an Alpha King waiting." In the highest tower of the royal palace, the crown room stood empty save for one figure. Counselor Roland paced the circular chamber, his footsteps echoing off ancient stone walls lined with the banners of 7 original Alpha clans. At the room's center, atop a pedestal of black marble, rested a replica of the wolf crown, a teaching tool used to prepare future kings for the weight of leadership. Unlike the true crown, this copy held no power, no curse, no imprisoned Alpha spirits. It was merely shaped metal and colored glass, a pale imitation of the artifact currently bound to King Magnus's brow. Roland approached the pedestal, running his fingers over the replica's surface. Soon, he would wear the true crown. Soon, absolute power would be his. The door creaked open behind him. Roland turned sharply, relaxing only when he recognized the gaunt figure of Malachi. "You take risks coming here," Roland said. "The king's spies are everywhere." "The king rides for Shadowfall Forest," Malachi replied, closing the door silently behind him, "with a full contingent of his most loyal guards." Roland's eyes narrowed. "Why? The forest is forbidden territory." "Something has awakened there. Something powerful." Malachi's thin lips curved into a smile that never reached his eyes. "My instruments detected a surge of ancient magic unlike anything I've recorded in decades. The king would have sensed it too." "What manner of magic?" Malachi approached the replica crown, studying it with clinical detachment. "If I didn't know better, I would say a soul keeper has awakened." Roland scoffed. "Soul keepers are extinct. My ancestors saw to that generations ago." "Perhaps not as thoroughly as they believed." Malachi traced one of the wolf heads on the replica. "The energy signature matches historical records perfectly. And there is more, the half-blood girl who escaped from Silveridge. My agents report she fled into Shadowfall." Roland stilled. "You think she is a latent soul keeper?" "Yes. The timing is too convenient to be coincidence." Malachi's violet eyes gleamed with excitement. "This changes nothing and everything. Our plan proceeds, but now we must account for a new variable." A half-blood soul keeper. Roland shook his head in disbelief. The old bloodlines would never have allowed such dilution. Desperation breeds adaptation. Malachi moved to the chamber's single window, gazing out at the withered landscape beyond the capital. The few surviving soul keepers would have hidden among humans, preserving their bloodline any way possible. Half-bloods would be perfect camouflage, dismissed as weak by wolf society, their latent abilities dormant until triggered. If Magnus finds her first, then our task becomes more urgent. Malachi turned back to Roland. The Moonstone shipments must be accelerated. Double the work details, triple them if necessary. The slaves are already dying at unprecedented rates, Roland protested. If we push harder, we may not have enough workers to complete the extraction. Malachi's expression hardened. Then find more slaves. Empty the border villages if you must. We need every ounce of moonstone extracted before the blood moon. Roland nodded reluctantly. And the girl? If she truly is a soul keeper, then I want her alive. Malachi's voice dropped to a near whisper. A soul keeper's blood has properties that could enhance our ritual 100-fold. With it, we might not merely transfer the crown, we could reshape it entirely. He approached Roland, placing a skeletal hand on the counselor's shoulder. Imagine it, my friend. Not 7 alpha spirits bound unwillingly to the crown, but a single consciousness, yours, empowered by their combined strength. Not immortality with slow decay, but eternal youth and vitality. Roland's breath quickened at the vision. And you can achieve this? With a soul keeper's blood? Yes. Malachi smiled, revealing teeth filed to points. My ancestor Maloran created the curse in haste with incomplete knowledge. I have spent 2 centuries perfecting what he began. 2 centuries? Roland stepped back, suddenly wary. You cannot be more than 50 years of age. Malachi laughed, the sound like dry leaves skittering across stone. My appearance is carefully maintained. My true age would disturb even you, counselor. His eyes flashed violet. Let us simply say that hatred and the desire for vengeance are powerful preservatives. Before Roland could respond, the chamber door burst open. A guard stood there, breathing heavily. Counselor Roland, he gasped. Emergency reports from the Western Territories. The rogue packs have united under a single leader. 3 border outposts have fallen already. Roland cursed. Mobilize the reserve battalions. I'll join the War Council immediately. As the guard departed, Roland turned back to Malachi. This is your doing, isn't it? These coordinated attacks. The sorcerer spread his hands innocently. A necessary distraction. With Magnus and his loyal guards riding east to Shadowfall, and you leading the defense against rogues in the west, the capital lies unprotected. His voice dropped to a whisper. Perfect timing for our final preparations. Roland studied his ally with new wariness, seeing the calculation behind those ancient eyes. He had allied with Malachi for power, knowing the risks. But standing here in the crown room, he suddenly wondered who truly controlled their partnership. Send your best trackers to Shadowfall, Roland ordered, reasserting his authority. Find the girl and bring her to your laboratory. I'll handle the rogue threat. As you command, counselor. Malachi bowed with exaggerated deference. As he straightened, his form seemed to waver slightly, like heat rising from summer stones. The blood moon approaches. Soon, very soon, 200 years of patience will be rewarded. He departed, leaving Roland alone with the replica crown, and the growing suspicion that he had allied himself with something far older and more dangerous than he had ever imagined. The moonlit clearing lived up to its name, a perfect circle of silver-blue grass surrounded by ancient oaks whose branches refused to encroach upon the sacred space. Here, according to Elena, the first pact between alphas and soulkeepers had been forged millennia ago, establishing the balance that would guide wolfkind for generations. Until ambition and fear had shattered that balance, Seraphina stood at the clearing's edge, Storm and 3 other ancient ones flanking her protectively. Their massive forms, reaching nearly to her shoulder even on all fours, provided comfort as she sensed the approaching hunting party. Magnus led them personally. She felt his presence like a bonfire among candles, overwhelming the signatures of the 20 elite guards who accompanied him. They moved with disciplined precision through Shadowfall, following tracking wolves who had caught Seraphina's scent from the village. Storm growled low in his throat, ears flattening. I know, Seraphina murmured, placing a calming hand on his broad head. They're almost here. As if summoned by her words, the underbrush at the far side of the clearing parted. A massive black wolf emerged, far larger than any normal wolf, but still smaller than the ancient ones. His coat gleamed like polished obsidian, and his eyes burned gold in the dappled forest light. Atop his head, seemingly fused to his skull, the wolf crown rode like a metallic parasite, its 7 wolf heads with ruby eyes glinting malevolently. Magnus in his wolf form. Behind him came his guards, some in wolf shape, others maintaining human form with weapons drawn. They spread out along the clearing's edge, wary of the ancient ones who had been little more than legend to most of the kingdom's wolves. Seraphina stepped forward into the clearing, feeling ancient magic rise around her, the neutrality enchantment that Elena had described. Here, neither Alpha nor Soulkeeper could dominate the other. The black wolf studied her for a long moment, golden eyes unreadable. Then his form blurred, elongated, shifted in a fluid transformation that spoke of centuries of practice. Where the wolf had stood, a man now straightened to his full imposing height. Magnus Blackthorne appeared to be in his late 40s, though Seraphina knew he was centuries older. His face might have been handsome once, before time and burden had carved deep lines around his eyes and mouth. His black hair, streaked with silver at the temples, framed strong features set in a perpetual expression of grim determination. The wolf crown sat upon his brow, its metal seeming to flow into his very skin at the points of contact. He wore simple riding leathers, rather than royal regalia, practical attire for a hunt. The only mark of his station beyond the crown was a silver wolf's head medallion at his throat. "So," he said, his voice deep and resonant with power, "the rumors are true. A soul keeper awakens in my kingdom." His gaze flicked to the ancient ones, and in the company of the forebearers, no less. Fascinating. Seraphina bowed her head respectfully, instinct guiding her actions. "King Magnus, I am Seraphina Hayes." "I know who you are." Magnus paced the edge of the clearing, his guards maintaining their positions. "The half-blood who escaped Councillor Roland's collection at Silveridge, who killed 2 royal guards in the process." His eyes narrowed, "though I suspect those guards were more Roland's than mine." "They would have sent me to die in the Moonstone mines," Seraphina said, "as they've sent countless half-bloods before me." "Moonstone mines?" Magnus stopped pacing. "Explain." Seraphina felt a flicker of surprise. "You don't know? Roland has been operating slave mines for months, possibly years. Half-bloods are worked until they die, extracting moonstone for some ritual planned for the blood moon." A shadow of genuine shock crossed Magnus's face before his expression hardened again. "Bold accusations against a royal counselor." "Truth is often bold, Your Majesty." Seraphina touched the emerald fragment at her throat, drawing courage from its warmth. "As is the truth that Roland and his ally Malachi plan to remove the wolf crown from your head and place it upon Roland's." At this, several of Magnus's guards growled, shifting closer to their king protectively. Magnus himself remained still, only the tightening of his jaw betraying his reaction. "Removing the crown would kill me," he said evenly, "and likely destroy half the kingdom in the process. Not if they use sufficient moonstone to temporarily nullify the curse." Seraphina took another step forward. "Malachi is a descendant of Maloran. He's spent centuries studying the curse, finding its weaknesses." "Centuries?" Magnus scoffed. "The man is hardly 50. His appearance is deceiving, just as the crown deceives with promises of power while slowly destroying its wearer." Seraphina gestured to the ruby-eyed wolf heads. 7 alpha spirits, bound for eternity, with no soul keepers to balance them. They consume you bit by bit, even as the land withers in reflection of the imbalance. The Ancient Ones moved forward to flank her, Storm taking position at her right hand. Magnus watched them with a wary respect that spoke of ancient knowledge. "You speak of balance," he said slowly, "yet soul keepers have been extinct for generations. Their bloodlines hunted to elimination by my ancestors, who feared the check on their power." His golden eyes studied her intently. "Until now, apparently. A half-blood soul keeper. The old alphas would writhe in their graves." "The old ways were lost," Seraphina acknowledged, "but not destroyed. The emerald fragment I carry is part of the soul keeper's heart, a crystal of immense power, shattered and hidden when the hunts began. And now you appear, conveniently, just as Roland supposedly plots against me." Magnus's tone remained skeptical, but Seraphina sensed his curiosity beneath the caution. "Why should I believe you?" Seraphina closed her eyes, reaching for her newly awakened abilities. The emerald fragment warmed against her skin as she extended her senses toward Magnus, seeking the connection that soul keepers were born to forge with alphas. She gasped as contact was established. Magnus's life force blazed before her inner vision, a towering inferno of power, determination, and isolation. But within that flame writhed 7 distinct entities, parasitic presences feeding on his essential self. The alpha spirits bound to the crown, slowly devouring his identity over centuries. Without conscious thought, Seraphina reached out with her power, creating a temporary barrier between Magnus and the spirits. For the first time in 200 years, the king experienced a moment of perfect clarity, free from their constant influence. Magnus staggered, one hand rising to the crown in shock. His guards moved forward in alarm, but he waved them back, golden eyes fixed on Seraphina with new understanding. "What did you do?" he demanded, his voice hoarse. "I showed you the truth," she replied simply, letting the temporary barrier dissolve. It had taken all her untrained strength to maintain it for even those few seconds. That is what soul keepers do. We reveal truth. We restore balance. Magnus approached slowly, stopping just beyond arm's reach. If what you say about Roland is true, if he truly plots with Malachi to take the crown, then all of Northcrest stands on the edge of catastrophe. Yes, Seraphina agreed. The ritual they plan would not merely transfer the crown. It would reshape it, using Soulkeeper blood, my blood, to grant Roland power beyond anything you currently wield. And you came to warn me? Why? What do you gain? Balance restored, the land healed, half-bloods treated as equals. Seraphina met his gaze steadily. And perhaps, if we find the other fragments of the Soulkeeper's heart, a way to free you from the crown's curse without destroying the kingdom. For a long moment, Magnus said nothing, his expression unreadable. Then he turned to his guards. "Set up a perimeter. No one approaches the clearing without my knowledge." To one particular guard, a gray-haired veteran with a scarred face, he added, "Captain Thorne, send scouts to verify these claims about Moonstone mines, quietly." Thorne, the same captain who had arrested Seraphina in Silveridge, bowed stiffly. "And if we find evidence, Your Majesty? Then we prepare for treason at the highest level." Magnus turned back to Seraphina. "You will accompany me to the capital. If you truly are a soul keeper, if your warnings prove accurate, then your place is at court, as it would have been in the ancient days." Storm growled, moving protectively closer to Seraphina. "Your companions are welcome as well," Magnus added, eyeing the ancient ones with respect, "though their presence may cause quite a stir in Northcrest." Seraphina placed a calming hand on Storm's head. "I must consult with Elder Elena before deciding." "The Silvermist Elder?" Magnus raised an eyebrow. "So the legends of a hidden pack in Shadowfall were true as well. It seems I have much to learn about my own kingdom." He gestured toward the forest. "By all means, consult your elder. I will await your decision here." As Seraphina turned to leave the clearing, Magnus called after her. "One question, Soulkeeper. If you seek to restore balance, to free me from this curse, what happens to the power contained in the crown? Power that has maintained Northcrest's borders for centuries against enemies who would destroy us utterly." Seraphina paused, considering. "True power lies not in domination, Your Majesty, but in harmony. The Ancient Ones have survived in Shadowfall for millennia without alpha aggression or Soulkeeper manipulation. Balance is not weakness, it is the greatest strength of all." She continued into the forest, feeling Magnus's thoughtful gaze on her back, and the weight of prophecy settling around her shoulders like a mantle she had been born to wear. In the darkness of the council chamber beneath Northcrest Castle, Malachi stood before an altar of black stone. Upon its surface lay an ancient text, its pages yellow with age, the ink faded to brown. Candles of deep purple cast eerie shadows across walls carved with forbidden symbols. 200 years, he whispered to the empty room. 200 years of patience, of planning, of sacrifice, all leading to this moment. He ran one skeletal finger across the text, tracing words written in a language few still understood, the original tongue of wolfkind, before humans had taught them speech. "A soul keeper awakens," he continued, speaking to unseen listeners. "The final piece falls into place. Magnus rides to meet his salvation, unaware he courts his destruction." From the shadows surrounding the altar, soft whispers responded. voices neither fully human nor wolf, existing in the space between realms. "Yes," they hissed. "The circle closes. The betrayal repeats." Malachi smiled, revealing teeth too sharp for a human mouth. "Soon, Father, soon you will be avenged. The curse you cast in your final moments will be completed, perfected." He raised his arms, violet energy crackling between his fingertips. "And the 7 shall be one, as was always intended." In the forests of Shadowfall, the Ancient Ones raised their muzzles to the sky, sensing a disturbance in the balance of power. Their howls echoed through the trees, a warning, a lament, a call to arms. And in the moonlit clearing, Magnus Blackthorn felt the crown burn against his skull as the 7 alpha spirits stirred with newfound hunger. Something approached that they desired, something they feared, a soul keeper with the power to change everything. The journey to Northcrest Castle took 4 days through territories Seraphina had never seen. Magnus led their unusual procession personally, flanked by his royal guards who maintained a respectful distance from Storm and the 3 other Ancient Ones accompanying them. Elena had elected to remain in Shadowfall with the rest of the Silver Mist pack, entrusting Seraphina's safety to the ancient wolves who seemed to regard her with a mixture of reverence and protective instinct. "Your presence stirs unease among my men," Magnus observed on the 3rd evening as they made camp in a sheltered valley. The king sat across from her at a small fire, separate from the larger blaze where his guards gathered. "They've spent their lives believing soul keepers were extinct and Ancient Ones mere legend." "Change is often uncomfortable," Seraphina replied, stroking Storm's massive head as the wolf lay beside her. "Yet sometimes necessary." Magnus studied her with those penetrating golden eyes that seemed to glow in the firelight. "You speak with wisdom beyond your years." "Not my wisdom, the fragments." Seraphina touched the emerald crystal at her throat. "Since awakening, I feel the knowledge of past soul keepers flowing through me, not fully formed thoughts, but impressions, instincts." "And what do these impressions tell you about me?" Magnus asked, his tone carefully neutral, though Seraphina sensed his genuine curiosity. She considered the question, allowing her newly awakened senses to extend toward him. The crown on his brow pulsed with malevolent energy, the 7 alpha spirits within it constantly straining against Magnus's iron will. Yet beneath that struggle, she perceived something unexpected. Loneliness, bone-deep and centuries old. "They tell me you are tired," she said softly, "that you have carried a burden alone, which was never meant to be borne by one person, that you continue because duty demands it, not because power brings you joy." A shadow passed over Magnus's face, quickly controlled. "Accurate assessments. Perhaps there is truth to the old legends of Soul Keeper's perceptive abilities." "You don't trust me yet," Seraphina noted. It wasn't a question. "I've lived 4 centuries, witnessed the rise and fall of dynasties, survived 17 assassination attempts." A humorless smile touched his lips. "Trust doesn't come easily. Yet you bring me to your capital, into the heart of your power. Because if you are what you claim, what I believe you may be, then you represent hope I had abandoned long ago." Magnus leaned forward, the firelight casting his face in sharp relief. "And if you are aligned with my enemies, better to keep you where I can watch you." Seraphina met his gaze steadily, a prudent approach for an alpha king. One doesn't survive centuries by being careless. Magnus glanced at Storm and the other Ancient Ones, keeping silent vigil around their small camp. "Though your guardians would make any hostile action against you rather difficult. They protect the legacy I represent, not just my person." Seraphina followed his gaze to the ancient wolves. They remember the time before balance was broken, when alphas and soul keepers worked in harmony. "A time none living has witnessed," Magnus pointed out, "save perhaps these Ancient Ones themselves. And soon the capital will witness them too. I imagine that will cause quite a stir." An understatement. Magnus's expression softened slightly. "The people need something to believe in again. The land withers, villages empty, rogues press our borders. Faith in the crown wanes with each passing year." "Because the crown itself is out of balance," Seraphina said gently. "Without soul keepers to temper the alpha spirits within it, their hunger grows, reflected in the land itself." Magnus touched the crown reflexively, wincing slightly as his fingers made contact with the black metal. Roland will not surrender power easily, especially if your accusations prove true. He controls half the council, and through them, much of the military. Then we must find proof compelling enough that even his supporters cannot ignore it. Captain Thorne's scouts should rendezvous with us before we reach the capital, Magnus said. If they've found these moonstone mines you spoke of. They will. Seraphina's certainty came from the memories she'd glimpsed during her awakening. Though I fear Roland won't be idle while we gather evidence. If he's truly planning to seize the crown during the blood moon ritual, we have less than 2 weeks to stop him. Then we should rest. Magnus rose with the fluid grace of a predator. The capital awaits, and with it, the opening moves of a game centuries in the making. As he turned to leave, Seraphina called after him. Magnus. He paused, looking back at her use of his name without title. The burden may not be yours alone to bear any longer. Something flickered in his golden eyes, a cautious hope quickly guarded. He nodded once, then disappeared into the darkness beyond the firelight. Seraphina leaned against Storm's warm flank, drawing comfort from the ancient wolf's solid presence. Tomorrow they would reach Northcrest Castle, and with it, dangers beyond anything she had faced in her 28 years of life. Yet strangely, fear was not the emotion foremost in her heart. For the first time since her mother's death, she felt purpose, a clear path where before there had been only survival. And beneath that purpose, something else stirred, a connection to the isolated king that transcended their brief acquaintance, as if her soul recognized something essential in his. Destiny, she whispered to Storm, who flicked an ear in acknowledgement. Or perhaps something older and simpler. Storm's rumbling growl seemed to agree with both possibilities. Northcrest Castle rose from the surrounding plain like a monument to faded glory. Once, according to the history Seraphina had glimpsed through her awakening, the castle had stood amidst lush forests and fertile fields. Now it dominated a landscape of withered grass and stunted trees, a stark reminder of the curse's effects on the land. The castle itself remained magnificent, despite the decay surrounding it. 7 great towers representing the original Alpha clans, connected by massive walls of gray stone. The central keep soared highest of all, topped by a spire of black iron that seemed to pierce the very sky. Magnus led their procession through the outer gates, where guards stood at attention, their shock at the Ancient Ones barely concealed behind disciplined expressions. Word of their approach had clearly spread. Citizens lined the streets of the capital city, falling silent as Seraphina passed with her wolf companions. They fear what they don't understand, Magnus said quietly, riding beside her now. But they also recognize power when they see it. The Ancient Ones have not walked these streets in living memory. Their presence changes things, Seraphina observed. Stories become reality. Legends walk among them. It inspires both fear and hope. A potent combination, Magnus agreed, one that might serve us well in the coming confrontation. As they approached the inner bailey, a contingent of richly dressed wolves awaited them on the steps of the keep. Members of the Alpha Council, Seraphina presumed. Their expressions ranged from curiosity to outright hostility. Roland is absent, Magnus noted, scanning the assembled dignitaries. As is Malachi, convenient. Or telling, Seraphina added. The king dismounted with fluid grace, then surprised his courtiers by personally offering Seraphina his hand to assist her. A murmur ran through the assembled nobles at this unprecedented courtesy. "My lords and ladies," Magnus announced, his voice carrying effortlessly across the courtyard. "I present to you Seraphina Hayes, a soul keeper awakened, accompanied by guardians from the ancient pack of Shadowfall. They come under my personal protection and hospitality." The silence that followed was absolute, broken only when an elderly wolf with a silver-headed cane stepped forward. "Your Majesty," he said, his voice trembling slightly, "soul keepers are extinct. The Ancient Ones mere legend. What trickery is this?" "No trickery, Lord Aldrich," Magnus replied evenly, "but truth long forgotten." He gestured to Storm and the other Ancient Ones, whose massive forms dwarfed the hunting wolves occasionally seen at court. "Do these appear to be ordinary wolves to you? Does their power not radiate in a way no modern wolf can match?" Lord Aldrich approached cautiously, his nostrils flaring as he took in the Ancient One's scent. His eyes widened in genuine shock. "They are different. Their scent carries age beyond reckoning." "And the woman?" asked a sharp-featured female counselor, her tone skeptical. "How can we verify she is truly a soul keeper and not simply a charlatan you found in the forest?" Lady Serena, Magnus acknowledged with a slight nod. Your skepticism is noted. However, before he could continue, Storm and the other Ancient Ones moved into a protective formation around Seraphina, their green eyes glowing with sudden intensity. The emerald fragment at her throat responded, pulsing with matching light. Without conscious intent, Seraphina felt her awareness expand, touching the minds of every wolf in the courtyard. Not controlling, Soul Keepers were not masters but harmonizers, but revealing their true selves beneath posturing and politics. Lord Aldrich gasped as his innermost thoughts were gently exposed, his genuine concern for the kingdom's decline, his private fears that the old ways had been too hastily abandoned. Lady Serena stepped back, her skepticism crumbling as Seraphina's presence revealed her own deeply buried knowledge, stories told by her grandmother about the balance once maintained between Alpha and Soul Keeper. The connection lasted only moments before Seraphina withdrew, unpracticed in her abilities and unwilling to intrude further, but the demonstration had achieved its purpose. The courtiers stood in stunned silence, many with tears in their eyes at having been truly seen for perhaps the first time in their lives. "Does that answer your question, Lady Serena?" Magnus asked quietly. The counselor bowed her head. "It does, Your Majesty. Forgive my doubt." "There is nothing to forgive in honest questioning," Seraphina said, finding her voice. "Soul Keepers do not demand blind faith, only open minds." Magnus surveyed the assembled nobles. "Where is Counselor Roland? His presence was requested for my return." "Urgent business in the Western Territories, Your Majesty," Lord Aldrich replied. "Rogue packs have united under a single leader, attacking border settlements. Counselor Roland leads our response personally." "And Malachi?" "His whereabouts are unknown," Lady Serena admitted. "He often disappears for days at his research." Magnus exchanged a meaningful glance with Seraphina. How convenient that both are absent upon our arrival, almost as if they knew to make themselves scarce. "Your Majesty," Lord Aldrich said hesitantly, "these rogue attacks are unprecedented in their coordination. 3 villages have been destroyed already." "A distraction," Seraphina said with sudden certainty, the knowledge rising from the fragment's connection to her mind. "Designed to draw forces away from the capital while preparations continue elsewhere." "Preparations for what?" Lady Serena asked. Magnus raised a hand, silencing further questions. "We will discuss these matters in council chambers. For now, Lady Seraphina and her companions will be shown to suitable accommodations." He addressed the assembled nobles once more. "I expect all council members present in the capital to attend an emergency session at dusk. Spread the word." As the courtiers dispersed, Magnus guided Seraphina toward the keep entrance. "That demonstration was effective," he murmured, "though perhaps more revealing than you intended." "The fragment responds to challenge," Seraphina admitted. "I have much to learn about controlling its powers." "Indeed, and little time to learn it." Magnus paused at the great doors. "Captain Thorne should return by tomorrow with his findings. Until then, we must tread carefully. Roland's influence runs deep, even in my own household." "You suspect spies?" "I know there are spies," Magnus corrected. "The question is merely how many and how highly placed." His golden eyes held a warning. "Trust no one but me, Seraphina. 2 centuries of ruling have taught me that loyalty is rarer than Moonstone itself." The quarters provided for Seraphina befitted a visiting dignitary rather than a former tavern worker from a border village. A spacious suite in the eastern tower overlooked the royal gardens, once magnificent, now struggling against the curse's creeping influence. Storm and 1 Ancient One remained with her, while the others took positions outside her chambers, their massive forms deterring any who might consider intruding. A maidservant brought fresh clothing suitable for court, dresses of fine wool and silk in emerald green that matched her fragment's glow. Seraphina changed gratefully, her travel-worn attire a poor fit for the intrigues of palace life. As twilight approached, a soft knock announced a visitor. At Seraphina's acknowledgement, the door opened to reveal a tall, silver-haired man with a weathered face marked by a scar running from temple to jaw. Captain Thorne, the same officer who had arrested her in Silveridge, now stood respectfully at attention. "Lady Seraphina," he said formally, "His Majesty requests your presence at the council meeting." She studied him curiously. "You look at me differently now, Captain." Thorne's expression remained professional, but something flickered in his eyes. "I have seen things these past days that challenge a lifetime of beliefs, my lady." "The Moonstone mines?" He nodded grimly. And more. My scouts found 3 such operations, hidden in remote mountain valleys. Half-bloods and human prisoners worked to death extracting moonstone in quantities I've never witnessed. His voice hardened. When I left Silveridge with you, I believed I served the kingdom's interests. Now I wonder whose interests I truly served. Roland's, Seraphina said simply, as did many who thought themselves loyal to the crown. The king waits, my lady, Thorn replied, neither confirming nor denying her assessment. The information I bring cannot wait. Storm rose from his resting place by the window, padding silently to Seraphina's side. Thorn eyed the massive wolf warily. Your companion is welcome as well, he added. The king anticipated you would not wish to be separated. Seraphina placed a hand on Storm's broad head. We go together or not at all. The council chamber occupied the heart of the central keep, a circular room dominated by a round table of polished black stone. 7 chairs of equal height surrounded it, representing the original Alpha clans. Only the king's seat stood slightly elevated, crafted from the same dark metal as the wolf crown itself. As Seraphina entered with Storm at her side, the assembled counselors rose in deference, not to her, she realized, but to the Ancient One whose power they instinctively recognized. Magnus sat in his elevated chair, the crown gleaming malevolently in the light of countless candles. Lady Seraphina, he acknowledged, gesturing to an empty seat at his right hand, a position of highest honor that caused several counselors to exchange glances. And her guardian, Storm of the Ancient Pack. Storm took position directly behind Seraphina's chair, his massive form casting a shadow across the polished floor. The message was clear. Harm her at your peril. We face grave matters, Magnus began without preamble. Captain Thorn has returned from his mission with disturbing findings. Captain, report what you have discovered. Thorn stepped forward, placing a leather pouch upon the table. He opened it, revealing dozens of moonstone crystals, small, rough-cut gems that pulsed with inner light. These were taken from 3 mining operations hidden in the western mountains, Thorn stated. Operations run by overseers bearing Counselor Roland's personal seal, using half-blood and human slaves as forced labor. He unrolled a map, pointing to marked locations. Here, here, and here. Each mine heavily guarded, each producing moonstone at rates that can only be described as desperate. Workers are literally being worked to death, with new shipments of slaves arriving weekly. Lord Aldrich leaned forward, his elderly face grave. For what purpose? Moonstone has limited applications, magical enhancements, ceremonial items, nothing that would require such production. We found partial records, Thorn continued, producing several parchments covered in encoded writing. Our scribes are working to decipher them fully, but initial translations mention a ritual scheduled for the blood moon, a ritual requiring massive amounts of refined moonstone. The blood moon rises in 12 days, Lady Serena observed. What ritual could possibly require such resources performed on such a specific date? Seraphina felt all eyes turn to her. The emerald fragment warmed against her skin, knowledge rising to her consciousness like bubbles in still water. A transfer ritual, she said, the words coming with certainty, though she had never studied such matters. The blood moon weakens magical bonds, including curses. With sufficient moonstone to amplify the effect, one might temporarily sever the connection between the wolf crown and its current wearer. Silence fell across the chamber as the implications became clear. Treason, Lord Aldrich whispered. Roland plans to take the crown for himself. Not merely take it, Magnus said, his voice deceptively calm, though Seraphina sensed the rage burning beneath. But reshape it, using the amplified power of the blood moon and moonstone. Is such a thing possible? Lady Serena asked, her sharp features pale with shock. With the right knowledge, yes. Magnus's golden eyes fixed on Seraphina. Knowledge that Maloran's descendant might possess after 2 centuries of study. Malachi, Lord Aldrich breathed, the king's own advisor. An advisor who has been accumulating influence and planting seeds of doubt for decades, Magnus confirmed. Always careful, always subtle, a whisper here, a suggestion there, gradually turning Roland and others against me while positioning himself as indispensable. Captain Thorn cleared his throat. There is more, Your Majesty. We captured one of Roland's lieutenants attempting to flee the largest mine. Under questioning, he revealed that Roland and Malachi seek not just the crown, but... He hesitated, glancing at Seraphina. Speak plainly, Captain, Magnus commanded. They seek a soul keeper's blood, Your Majesty. specifically for the ritual. The lieutenant claimed such blood would amplify the transfer tenfold, allowing not just the movement of the crown from one head to another, but its complete transformation. Serafina felt Storm tense behind her, a low growl rumbling in his massive chest. The emerald fragment pulsed faster against her skin, responding to her quickened heartbeat. So it is not merely coincidence that Roland has intensified his collection of half-bloods in recent months, Magnus said. He searches for latent soul keepers, unaware that one has awakened beyond his reach. But he knows now, Lady Serena pointed out. Your return with Lady Serafina and the Ancient Ones cannot have gone unnoticed. Roland's spies will have reported everything. Which means we must act quickly. Magnus rose from his seat, his powerful frame seeming to fill the chamber with his presence. Captain Thorne, you will take your most trusted men and secure the Moonstone mines, free the prisoners, arrest the overseers. Lord Aldrich, Lady Serena, assess which council members remain loyal. We cannot move against Roland without knowing who stands with us. And what of Roland himself? Lord Aldrich asked. He commands significant military forces in the Western Territories. I will deal with Roland personally, Magnus stated, the wolf crown seeming to pulse in anticipation. But first, we must locate Malachi. Without his knowledge, the ritual cannot proceed. The records mention the laboratory, Thorne offered, located beneath the old temple in the northern quarter. A place supposedly abandoned for centuries, Lady Serena noted with surprise. Search it, Magnus ordered, but approach with extreme caution. Malachi is no ordinary adversary. As the council dispersed to their assignments, Magnus gestured for Serafina to remain. When they were alone, save for Storm and the king's personal guards, his formal demeanor softened slightly. You've been quiet, he observed. I'm still processing, Serafina admitted. Everything is happening so quickly. Such is the nature of court intrigue. Magnus studied her with those penetrating golden eyes. The council accepted your identity with surprising readiness. The Ancient Ones are difficult to dismiss. Serafina nodded toward Storm. And perhaps some part of them remembers what was lost when Soul Keepers were hunted to extinction. Balance, harmony between power and wisdom. Magnus touched the crown reflexively, wincing as the metal burned against his fingertips. The 7 alpha spirits grow more restless by the day. They sense your presence, the first Soul Keeper to walk these halls in generations. They fear what you represent. And what do I represent to you? Serafina asked boldly. Magnus held her gaze for a long moment. Hope, he finally said, the word hanging in the air between them. Something I abandoned centuries ago. Before Serafina could respond, the chamber doors burst open. Captain Thorne returned, his expression grim. Your Majesty, he reported. Malachi's laboratory has been abandoned, recently and in haste, judging by the materials left behind. What sort of materials? Magnus demanded. Scrolls, magical implements, and this. Thorne placed a crystal vial on the table. Inside, a viscous red liquid glowed with unnatural light. According to the notes found nearby, it is blood taken from a descendant of the original Soul Keepers, not pure enough for the ritual, but used in preliminary experiments. Serafina felt a chill run through her body. Martha, she whispered, my guardian from Silveridge. Her family protected mine for generations after my mother's death. Her hands clenched into fists. Did they find anything indicating where the prisoners from Silveridge were taken? To the largest mine in the Western Range, Thorne confirmed, where extraction is most intensive. Magnus studied the vial with distaste. So Roland and Malachi had already begun experimenting with Soul Keeper blood, however diluted. His expression hardened. But now they know a true Soul Keeper has awakened. You are in grave danger, Serafina. We all are, she countered. If they succeed in transferring the crown to Roland with Malachi's enhancements, then Roland becomes more than king, Magnus finished. He becomes a vessel for 7 unbalanced alpha spirits, with no Soul Keeper to temper their hunger. The kingdom wouldn't merely continue its slow decline, Serafina said, understanding flooding through her. It would be consumed entirely, which is why you must be protected at all costs. Magnus turned to Thorne. Double the guard on Lady Serafina's chambers. No one enters without my personal authorization. With respect, Your Majesty, Serafina interjected. Locking me away solves nothing. If Roland and Malachi seek my blood for their ritual, they will find a way regardless of how many guards you post. What do you suggest? Magnus asked, his tone suggesting he already anticipated her answer. We find the remaining fragments of the Soul Keeper's heart. Seraphina touched the emerald crystal at her throat. With the complete heart restored, I could fully awaken as a prime Soul Keeper, powerful enough to counter whatever ritual they've designed. And where would we find these fragments? Magnus asked. They've been lost for generations. Storm moved forward suddenly, his green eyes focused intently on Magnus. The Ancient One growled softly, then looked pointedly at the wolf crown. Understanding dawned in Magnus's expression. Of course, he murmured. The crown and the heart were created as counterparts. Each would contain a map to the other, in case one was ever lost or destroyed. Can you access such information? Seraphina asked. From within the crown? Magnus's expression turned grim. Not without risk. The 7 alpha spirits guard their secrets jealously. Attempting to extract information they wish to conceal would mean confronting them directly in the mental realm where they hold sway. You would be at a disadvantage, Seraphina noted. A severe one. Magnus touched the crown again, his fingers trembling slightly, the only outward sign of the constant battle he waged against the entities bound within. Without a Soul Keeper's assistance, I would likely be overwhelmed. The emerald fragment pulsed at Seraphina's throat, warmth spreading through her chest. Then I will assist you. Create a link between us, and I will help you face them. The danger would be extreme, Magnus warned, for both of us. If we fail, the alpha spirits might consume both our minds. And if we do nothing, Roland and Malachi will succeed. Seraphina straightened in her chair, decision made. I've spent my life hiding from who and what I am, Magnus. I'm done hiding. The king studied her for a long moment, then nodded slowly. Very well. We will attempt the connection tonight, in the crown chamber where the original ritual binding the alpha spirits was performed. He turned to Captain Thorne. Continue the search for Malachi, and prepare our forces for possible confrontation with Roland's troops. After Thorne departed, Magnus and Seraphina stood in silence, each contemplating the dangerous path ahead. You should rest before tonight, Magnus finally said. The mental connection will demand all your strength. As it will yours, Seraphina observed. When did you last truly rest, Magnus? A humorless smile touched his lips. Rest comes rarely when 7 ancient entities constantly battle for control of your mind. He gestured toward the door. Storm will remain with you. Trust no one else, Seraphina. Roland's influence runs deeper than even I suspected. As she turned to leave, Magnus called after her. Seraphina. She paused, looking back. Thank you for your courage. The words were simple, yet Seraphina sensed the weight behind them. Centuries of solitude, of bearing burdens alone, of never trusting or being trusted fully. For a man who had lived 400 years, genuine gratitude was perhaps the rarest gift he could offer. She inclined her head in acknowledgement and departed with Storm at her side, feeling Magnus's golden gaze follow her until the chamber doors closed behind them. The crown chamber occupied the highest level of the central spire, a circular room whose windows offered views in all directions, the entirety of Northcrest Kingdom visible from this single vantage point, or rather, what remained of it. Even in the silvery moonlight, Seraphina could see the withered forests, the abandoned fields, the scattered lights of dwindling villages. The chamber itself contained little furniture, only a circular dais at its center, surrounded by 7 pillars carved with the symbols of the original Alpha clans. The floor was inlaid with silver in intricate patterns that Seraphina recognized instinctively as channeling runes, designed to focus and direct magical energies. Magnus awaited her, having exchanged his formal attire for a simple black tunic that emphasized his powerful build. Without the trappings of kingship, he appeared both younger and somehow more dangerous, the alpha wolf beneath the royal facade. The original binding ceremony was performed here, he explained as Seraphina approached. 7 alpha leaders combined their powers to create a crown that would unite their strengths, allowing them to defeat enemies that threatened all wolfkind. But without soul keepers to balance that power, Seraphina added, understanding flowing from the fragment's connection to her mind. Indeed, the soul keepers had already begun to dwindle by then, hunted by alphas who feared limitation on their authority. Magnus gestured to the dais. When Malaran cast his curse 2 centuries ago, he perverted the original binding, trapping the 7 alpha spirits within the crown and binding them to me eternally. Neither they nor I can be freed while the other exists. Unless we find another way, Seraphina touched her emerald fragment, which pulsed with steady light in the darkened chamber, through the complete heart. If it still exists to be found. Magnus stepped onto the dais. Are you certain you wish to proceed? Once begun, the connection cannot be broken until resolved, one way or another. Storm growled softly, padding around the chamber's perimeter as if searching for hidden threats. Satisfied, the Ancient One took position near the entrance, alert but unobtrusive. I'm certain, Seraphina said, joining Magnus on the dais. What must I do? Place your hands on the crown, he instructed. The fragment will create a natural channel between us. Through it, you can help me confront the alpha spirits and extract the information we need. Seraphina stepped closer, close enough to see the fine lines etched into Magnus's face by centuries of existence, close enough to sense the perpetual pain he endured from the crown's burning touch. For a moment they stood facing each other, an alpha king and an awakening soul keeper, representatives of powers meant to balance each other, now attempting to restore what had been broken generations ago. She raised her hands slowly, placing them gently on either side of the wolf crown. The metal burned cold against her fingertips, a sharp contrast to the warmth of the emerald fragment at her throat. Focus on the fragment's energy, Magnus murmured, his golden eyes holding hers. Let it flow through you, creating a bridge between our minds. Seraphina closed her eyes, concentrating on the crystal's pulsing warmth. She felt it respond, heat intensifying until it seemed her very blood caught fire. The sensation spread upward, flowing through her arms to her fingertips where they touched the crown. A jolt like lightning coursed through her body. Seraphina gasped as her consciousness separated from physical reality, drawn into a mental landscape not her own. She found herself standing in a vast circular chamber, a spectral version of the room they occupied in the physical world, but altered in significant ways. Here, the 7 pillars surrounding the dais glowed with internal fire, and upon each sat a throne. 6 were occupied by figures that defied easy description, part wolf, part human, part living shadow. Their eyes burned ruby red, matching the glowing stones set into the wolf crown's metallic wolf heads. The 7th throne stood empty. At the center of the chamber, Magnus knelt, his form translucent and flickering like a candle flame in wind. Around his head, the wolf crown blazed with malevolent energy, chains of dark power extending from it to each of the enthroned figures. So, spoke one of the entities, its voice like stone grinding against metal. The last soul keeper dares enter our domain, its burning gaze fixed on Seraphina. Foolish. Brave, countered another, this one more feminine in aspect, though no less terrifying. Or desperate. Either way, she comes too late. The balance was broken generations ago. Seraphina approached Magnus slowly, noting how his spectral form strengthened slightly at her proximity. The emerald fragment, visible here as a glowing green star at her throat, pulsed in rhythm with her heartbeat. I come seeking knowledge, she addressed the assembled alpha spirits directly. The location of the remaining soul-keeper heart fragments. Laughter, cold and cruel, echoed from all 6 thrones. Knowledge has a price, little soul-keeper, said a third entity, this one massive and bear-like in proportion. Are you prepared to pay it? What price do you demand? Seraphina asked, reaching Magnus and placing a supportive hand on his shoulder. She felt his form solidify further at her touch, drawing strength from the emerald fragment's energy. Freedom, hissed the first spirit. Release us from this prison of metal and magic. You know I cannot do that, Seraphina replied steadily, not without releasing the curse upon the kingdom. Then perhaps a smaller bargain, suggested the feminine entity, leaning forward on her throne. 1 fragment's location for one of us freed. A fair exchange, wouldn't you agree? Magnus rose to his feet, his spectral form now fully solid. Don't listen to them, Seraphina. They cannot be trusted. Oh, but we can, old friend, the bear-like spirit rumbled. We've shared your mind for 2 centuries. We know your every thought, your every fear, your growing feelings for this soul-keeper who appeared so conveniently when your loneliness had reached its peak. Magnus's expression hardened. We came for information, nothing more. Nothing more? A 4th spirit spoke, this one slender and fox-like. Are you certain? 400 years is a long time to live without companionship, without touch, without love. Its ruby eyes gleamed. We feel your desire, Magnus, your hope that this soul-keeper might end more than just your curse. Seraphina felt heat rise to her cheeks, but kept her expression neutral. "The fragments," she insisted, "their locations." The 6 spirits exchanged glances, some ancient communication passing between them. Finally, the feminine entity spoke again. "Very well. A demonstration of good faith." She waved a shadowy hand, and the air before them shimmered, revealing an image of a mountainous landscape. "The ruby fragment lies here, in the temple of First Moon, hidden beneath the altar of sacrifice." The image shifted, showing a specific mountain peak with a cave entrance visible halfway up its eastern face. "Why would you simply tell us?" Magnus asked suspiciously. "What do you gain?" "Perhaps we tire of this existence as much as you do, old friend," the fox spirit replied with a sly smile. "2 centuries bound to a stubborn host who resists our influence at every turn. Perhaps we seek change." "Or perhaps," Seraphina suggested, the emerald fragment flaring brighter, "you fear what might happen should the heart be restored and a prime soul keeper fully awakened." The bear spirit snarled, rising partially from its throne. "You overestimate your importance, half-blood. Even with the complete heart, you would be no match for us." "Then why did your kind hunt soul keepers to near extinction?" Seraphina challenged. "Why destroy what posed no threat?" Silence fell across the spectral chamber. The alpha spirits exchanged glances again, this time with visible unease. "Because together, we are stronger than separate," the feminine spirit finally admitted. "Alpha and soul keeper, power and wisdom, force and balance. The crown was designed for this duality before Malaran's curse twisted its purpose. And now Roland and Malachi seek to twist it further," Magnus said, "to remove any possibility of balance." "Yes!" hissed the first spirit, its ruby eyes flaring. "The sorcerer's descendant plans to corrupt our purpose entirely, binding us not to the crown, but to his will alone. We would become nothing but power to be channeled, our identities erased." "Then help us stop them," Seraphina urged. "Tell us where the remaining fragments lie." The 6 spirits conferred silently once more. Finally, the bear entity spoke. "The sapphire fragment lies beneath the falls of Moonwater, encased in crystal that only Soulkeeper touch can melt. The topaz fragment is hidden in plain sight, part of the royal scepter, disguised as a common gemstone. The amethyst and diamond fragments were taken by the last Soulkeepers who fled north beyond the ice mountains. Whether they still exist, we cannot say." "And the final fragment?" Magnus pressed. "The onyx fragment," the feminine spirit said, her voice dropping to a whisper. "It lies in possession of one you know well, Magnus, one who has hidden in shadows for centuries, manipulating events from afar." "Malachi," Seraphina breathed. "Not Malachi," the fox spirit corrected with a cold smile. "His master. For Malachi is but a servant to one older still, one whose hatred for you, Magnus, spans generations." Before either could demand clarification, the mental landscape shuddered violently. The 6 alpha spirits rose from their thrones in alarm. "We are discovered," the bear entity growled. "The sorcerer scries for your minds. You must leave now before he traces the connection." "How?" Seraphina asked, feeling the mental construct crumbling around them. "Through the fragment," the feminine spirit instructed urgently. "Focus on its energy. Let it pull you back." As the spectral chamber disintegrated, the fox spirit called out one final message. "Beware the blood moon. If the ritual begins, nothing will stop it. Not Soulkeeper, not Alpha King, not even the gods themselves." Seraphina clutched the emerald fragment, concentrating on its warmth, its connection to her physical form. She reached out instinctively, grasping Magnus's hand as the mental world collapsed into swirling darkness. With a violent jolt, Seraphina's consciousness slammed back into her body. She staggered backward, would have fallen if not for Storm suddenly appearing behind her, the Ancient One's solid form providing support. Magnus likewise stumbled, one hand clutching the crown, which now glowed with angry red light. Blood trickled from his nose, physical evidence of the mental battle he had endured. "We have what we need," he gasped, straightening with visible effort. "And none too soon. Malachi was searching for our minds, attempting to trace the connection." "Then he knows we've spoken with the alpha spirits," Seraphina said, her own voice hoarse. "Worse, he knows we seek the heart fragments." Magnus wiped the blood from his face. "We must move quickly. The Temple of First Moon lies 3 days' ride to the east. The Moonwater Falls, 2 days south." "And the royal scepter?" "In the treasury, 1 level below us." Magnus managed a grim smile. At least one fragment is easily obtained. Seraphina touched the emerald fragment, which had grown uncomfortably hot against her skin. The spirits warned of a master beyond Malachi, someone with an ancient grudge. A mystery for another time, Magnus decided. Our priority must be gathering the fragments before Roland and Malachi realize our intent. As if summoned by his words, the chamber door burst open. Captain Thorne rushed in, his face pale with urgency. "Your Majesty," he reported, "scouts bring dire news. Roland marches on the capital with his entire western force, 3,000 soldiers strong. They fly the banner of rightful succession." "Open rebellion," Magnus said grimly. "How long until they arrive?" 2 days at most, sire." "And the Moonstone mines?" "Secured, Your Majesty. The prisoners freed, the overseers arrested." Thorne hesitated. But much of the refined moonstone was already transported elsewhere. We found documents indicating delivery to a location beneath the old northern temple, Malachi's laboratory, where preparations for the ritual undoubtedly continue, Magnus concluded. He turned to Seraphina. "Our timeline has shortened drastically. We cannot reach the distant fragments before Roland's forces arrive." Seraphina felt the weight of decision settle on her shoulders. "Then we focus on what we can accomplish. The scepter fragment and the one at Temple of First Moon." "I'll go to the temple," Magnus decided. "With my speed in wolf form, I can return before Roland's army reaches the capital. You will remain here under heavy guard to secure the scepter fragment." "Dividing our forces seems unwise," Seraphina objected, "especially with Roland approaching and Malachi unaccounted for." "More unwise would be risking the last awakened Soulkeeper in an excursion beyond the capital's defenses." Magnus's tone brooked no argument. "I've lived 4 centuries, Seraphina. I've faced death countless times. You have only just begun to discover your power." Storm growled, clearly displeased with the plan. The Ancient One moved to Seraphina's side, green eyes fixed intently on Magnus. "Your guardian disapproves," Magnus noted wryly. "Storm believes we should remain together," Seraphina translated, somehow understanding the Ancient One's intent. "That separation makes us vulnerable to our enemies." "Perhaps," Magnus acknowledged. "But tactical necessity sometimes overrides ideal strategy. Time works against us, Seraphina." A sudden commotion outside the chamber interrupted their discussion. Guards shouted in alarm, followed by sounds of struggle. Storm moved into a protective stance before Seraphina, hackles raised. The doors flew open again, but this time no guard entered. Instead, a swirling cloud of violet energy filled the doorway, coalescing slowly into a humanoid shape. "How touching," said a voice like dry leaves rustling. "The Alpha King and his Soulkeeper, planning their heroic resistance." The violet mist solidified further, revealing Malachi's gaunt form, his eyes glowing with unnatural light. "Unfortunately, your plans have changed." Magnus moved with blinding speed, placing himself between Seraphina and the sorcerer. "You dare enter my presence uninvited, traitor?" "Traitor?" Malachi laughed, the sound eerily hollow. "One cannot betray what one never served, Magnus. I have only ever served one master, vengeance." He raised skeletal hands, violet energy crackling between his fingertips. 2 centuries I have waited for this moment. 2 centuries watching you struggle against the crown's influence, searching for the perfect opportunity to strike. "Malaran," Magnus growled, "you're his descendant." "Descendant?" Malachi's thin lips curved into a smile. "Oh no, Magnus, not descendant." His form wavered, features shifting like smoke and wind. For a brief moment, different eyes stared from that gaunt face, eyes Magnus clearly recognized, judging by his shock. "Impossible," the king whispered. "I took your head myself." "You took a body," Malachi, or rather, Maloran, corrected. "One of many vessels I have occupied over the centuries. Did you truly believe a sorcerer of my caliber would fail to prepare for death?" He gestured dismissively. "The crown was meant to be your prison, Magnus, a fitting punishment for your arrogance. But now, with the blood moon approaching and a soul keeper's power to harness, I can complete what was begun 200 years ago." Storm launched himself toward the sorcerer with supernatural speed, massive jaws aiming for Maloran's throat. The Ancient One passed straight through the sorcerer's form, which dissolved into violet mist before reforming. "Ancient Ones," Maloran observed with clinical interest. "I thought your kind had retreated from the world entirely. Fascinating." He turned his attention to Seraphina, who felt the emerald fragment burn hot against her skin in response to his gaze. "And you, Soul Keeper, half-blood, untrained, barely awakened, yet you've accomplished in days what others failed to achieve for centuries. You've given Magnus hope." He extended one skeletal hand toward her. "Come with me willingly, and I'll ensure your death is painless. Your blood is all I require, the final ingredient in a ritual centuries in the making." "She goes nowhere with you," Magnus snarled, his form beginning to shift as the wolf within responded to threat. Malloran sighed theatrically. "Always the protector, Magnus, always the noble alpha. It grows tiresome." His gaze hardened. "Very well. If you will not surrender her, I shall take what I need by force." He raised both hands, violet energy coalescing into a pulsing sphere between them. Before he could release it, however, a silver arrow whistled through the chamber, passing directly through the sorcerer's chest. Malloran's form wavered momentarily, his concentration broken. Captain Thorne stood in the doorway, enchanted bow in hand, already knocking another silver-tipped arrow. "Your Majesty," he called, "we must evacuate immediately. The entire northern wing is under attack." "Roland's forces?" Magnus demanded, already guiding Seraphina toward the exit. "No, sire. Creatures of shadow, conjured beasts unlike anything I've seen." Malloran laughed, his form re-solidifying despite the disruption. "My pets grow restless, it seems. No matter. They will keep your guards occupied while we conclude our business." He gestured sharply, and the chamber doors slammed shut, trapping them inside. Magnus completed his transformation, black fur rippling across his powerful form as he assumed wolf shape. The wolf crown remained, seeming to float above his lupine head. He lunged at Malloran, moving faster than human eyes could track. This time, the sorcerer could not fully evade. Magnus's teeth caught Malloran's arm, tearing through the spectral flesh. The sorcerer hissed in pain, violet energy flaring around the wound. "First blood to you, old friend," he acknowledged, clutching the injured limb, "but not last blood." He flung his uninjured hand outward, releasing a wave of violet energy that sent Magnus crashing into one of the chamber's stone pillars. Seraphina felt the emerald fragment pulse frantically against her skin. Instinctively, she reached for its power, feeling it flow through her veins like liquid fire. Her vision sharpened, time seeming to slow around her. Storm circled the sorcerer, looking for another opening. Captain Thorne fired arrow after enchanted arrow, each passing through Malloran's form, but forcing him to expend energy maintaining his cohesion. Magnus recovered quickly, shaking off debris as he prepared for another attack. His golden eyes met Seraphina's briefly, a silent communication passing between them. She understood immediately. They needed to coordinate their assault. The emerald fragment flared brighter as Seraphina extended her awakening abilities, creating a mental link with Magnus similar to what they had shared in the crown chamber. Through it, she sensed his plan and moved to implement her part. As Magnus and Storm launched simultaneous attacks from opposite sides, Seraphina focused the fragment's energy into a concentrated beam of emerald light, aiming directly at the sorcerer's chest. Malloran deflected Magnus with a shield of violet energy and dodged Storm's massive jaws, but Seraphina's attack caught him unprepared. The emerald beam struck true, burning through Malloran's spectral form with searing intensity. The sorcerer screamed, a sound of genuine agony, as his form destabilized further. "This changes nothing," he gasped, his features melting and reforming erratically. "Roland marches. The ritual chamber awaits. The blood moon comes whether I stand before you or not." His gaze fixed on Seraphina with terrible intensity. "And you, Soul Keeper, you cannot hope to master powers barely awakened in time to stop what's coming." With a final surge of violet energy, Malloran's form dissolved completely, leaving only echoing laughter and a promise. "When next we meet, I will take not just your blood, but your soul itself." The chamber doors burst open as the sorcerer's magic dissipated. Guards rushed in, weapons ready, only to find Magnus returning to human form, Seraphina leaning heavily against Storm's solid flank, and Captain Thorne collecting his spent arrows. "Search the entire castle," Magnus ordered, his voice hoarse from the transformation. Malloran may have left other surprises behind. As the guards dispersed, he approached Seraphina. "Are you injured?" She shook her head, though exhaustion threatened to overwhelm her. "The fragment, using its power so directly, it drains me." "You fought well," Magnus said, genuine admiration in his tone. "Few have faced Malaran and lived to speak of it." "We didn't defeat him," Serafina pointed out, "merely drove him off temporarily." "Even that is significant." Magnus turned to Captain Thorne. "The situation in the northern wing?" "Contained for now, Your Majesty. The shadow creatures dissipated when Malaran fled." Thorne's expression remained grave, but our scouts confirm Roland's approach. 3,000 soldiers as reported, plus mercenary forces from beyond our borders. "And within the castle, how many remain loyal?" "Perhaps half the royal guard, sire. Many had already been subverted by Roland or fear Maloran's sorcery." Magnus absorbed this news with grim acceptance. "Prepare the loyal forces for siege. Strengthen the southern and eastern defenses particularly." "And you, Your Majesty?" Thorne asked, clearly concerned. "I must obtain the fragment from the Temple of First Moon before Roland's forces cut off that option." Magnus turned back to Serafina. "The plan remains. You will secure the scepter fragment while I journey east. Dividing our strength seems even more dangerous now that we know Maloran himself orchestrates these events," Serafina argued. "More dangerous still would be leaving both fragments beyond our reach." Magnus's expression softened slightly. "I understand your concern, Serafina, but 4 centuries of existence have taught me to recognize when risks must be taken." Storm growled, clearly siding with Serafina, the Ancient One's green eyes fixed on Magnus with unmistakable disapproval. "Your guardian questions my judgment," Magnus noted dryly. "Storm believes, as I do, that Soul Keeper and Alpha are strongest together," Serafina translated. "That separation leaves both vulnerable." "Perhaps," Magnus acknowledged, "but tactical necessity sometimes overrides ideal strategy," Serafina finished for him. "You said that already, but consider this. What if separation is exactly what our enemies desire? What if Malaran appeared specifically to provoke this decision?" Magnus hesitated, weighing her words. Captain Thorne cleared his throat respectfully. "If I may, Your Majesty," he ventured. "Lady Serafina raises a valid concern, and there may be a compromise. The treasury lies deep within the castle's most defensible section. If Lady Serafina secures the scepter fragment while you prepare for the eastern journey, you could depart together at dawn with the strongest escort we can muster." Magnus considered this suggestion. "That would delay our departure." "By hours only," Thorne pointed out, "and would ensure the Soul Keeper remains protected during a critical task." After a moment's further thought, Magnus nodded. "Very well. We secure the scepter tonight, then journey to the Temple of First Moon together at first light." He turned to Serafina. "Will that satisfy your guardian's concerns?" Storm rumbled deep in his chest, not entirely appeased, but accepting the compromise. Serafina placed a calming hand on the Ancient One's massive head. "It's the best option available," she agreed, "though I still sense danger approaching from all directions." "As do I," Magnus admitted, "but we face it standing together, Alpha and Soul Keeper, as it was meant to be." The words hung between them, weighted with both history and promise. For a moment, Serafina glimpsed the man beneath the crown, not just the immortal king, but someone who had endured centuries of isolation, fighting a constant battle against the very source of his power. "Together, then," she affirmed, the emerald fragment pulsing in rhythm with her heartbeat. As they left the crown chamber, the wolf crown gleamed in the fading light, its ruby eyes seeming to follow their departure with malevolent awareness. The 7 alpha spirits bound within stirred restlessly, sensing change approaching. Whether salvation or destruction, even they could not foresee. The royal treasury of Northcrest Castle lay deep beneath the earth, accessible only through a single corridor guarded by enchanted iron doors. As Magnus led Serafina down the torchlit passageway, the ancient stonework seemed to press closer with each step, as if the very castle sensed the gravity of their mission. Storm padded silently beside them, the Ancient One's massive form dwarfing the regular wolves who served as treasury guardians. These wolves, descendants of the original pack that had protected the royal treasures for generations, bowed their heads as Magnus approached, their golden eyes widening at the sight of an Ancient One in their domain. "They've never seen one of Storm's kind," Magnus explained, noting Serafina's questioning glance. "For them, it's like watching legend come to life. Much like a soul keeper walking these halls again," Serafina observed. "Indeed." Magnus placed his palm against the iron doors, which recognized his touch, and swung inward with surprising silence. though I wonder which they find more unsettling, Storm or you. The treasury beyond was not the mountain of gold coins and jewels that tales might suggest, but a carefully organized chamber with artifacts displayed on pedestals of varying heights. Weapons forged in ages past, armor worn by legendary warriors, scrolls containing knowledge too dangerous for the royal library. Each item represented power accumulated over centuries of rule. At the chamber's center, bathed in light from crystalline lamps, stood a glass case containing a silver scepter. Unlike the ostentatious royal regalia of human kingdoms, this scepter was elegant in its simplicity. A slender rod of polished silver, topped with what appeared to be a perfectly ordinary topaz crystal. "The royal scepter of judgment," Magnus said, approaching the case, "carried by the Alpha King or Queen when passing sentence in matters of pack law. I've wielded it perhaps a dozen times in 2 centuries, justice being preferable to judgment in most cases." Seraphina followed, the emerald fragment at her throat pulsing with increasing intensity as she neared the scepter. "The topaz is no ordinary gemstone," she said, certainty flowing through her. "It's a fragment of the Soul Keeper's heart, disguised through enchantment." "Hidden in plain sight," Magnus agreed. "The last place anyone would look for a Soul Keeper artifact would be among the Alpha's ceremonial tools." He passed his hand over the case, which dissolved like morning mist, allowing him to lift the scepter carefully. As he held it out to Seraphina, the seemingly ordinary topaz began to glow with inner light, responding to the emerald fragment's proximity. "It recognizes you," Magnus observed. "Take it." Seraphina hesitated only briefly before wrapping her fingers around the silver rod. The moment her skin made contact, the topaz flared brilliantly, its disguising enchantment falling away to reveal a crystal that matched her emerald in size and cut, though golden amber in color. The 2 fragments pulsed in perfect synchronization, emerald and topaz light intermingling. Seraphina gasped as knowledge flooded her consciousness, memories not her own, skills she had never learned, wisdom accumulated through generations of soul keepers who had carried the topaz fragment. "What do you see?" Magnus asked, his voice seeming to come from a great distance. "Everything," Seraphina whispered, overwhelmed by the influx of information. "The topaz fragment contains the collective knowledge of the bearer lineage, soul keepers who specialized in carrying messages between packs, maintaining communication and understanding across vast territories." She carefully separated the topaz from the scepter, the silver rod remaining in her left hand while the crystal rested in her right palm. The 2 fragments called to each other, yearning to be united. "They want to merge," she said, bringing her hands together. "Are you certain that's wise?" Magnus asked, concern evident in his tone. Elena mentioned nothing about combining fragments before finding them all. "The fragments themselves guide me," Seraphina explained, the certainty flowing from the crystals rather than her own limited experience. "Each union increases the heart's power, awakening more of my abilities. We cannot afford to wait." Before Magnus could object further, Seraphina pressed the 2 crystals together. Light erupted from between her fingers, emerald and topaz swirling, merging, becoming something greater than either alone. The sensation of power flowing into her intensified tenfold, causing her knees to buckle. Magnus caught her before she could fall, supporting her weight effortlessly. Storm moved closer, green eyes fixed on the transformation occurring in Seraphina's hands. When the light finally dimmed, a single crystal remained where 2 had been, larger than either original fragment, pulsing with a complex internal glow that shifted between emerald and topaz hues. "The union is complete," Seraphina said, her voice steadier now as she regained her equilibrium. 2 fragments joined, 5 remained separated. "And you?" Magnus studied her face intently. "How has this affected you?" Seraphina took inventory of her altered self. Her senses, already enhanced by the awakening ritual, had sharpened further. She could perceive the life essence of every being in the castle, from the wolves guarding the treasury to the smallest mouse in the distant kitchens. More significantly, she felt Magnus's presence with unprecedented clarity, not just his physical form, but the complex tapestry of his mind, his emotions, his constant struggle against the crown's influence. "I am more," she finally answered. "My perception has expanded, and with it, my understanding of what a soul keeper truly is." She met his golden gaze directly. I can sense you now, Magnus. Not just your strength, but your pain. The crown burns constantly, doesn't it? Not just physically, but into your very essence. Magnus did not deny it. 200 years of unceasing fire, he acknowledged quietly. One grows accustomed to pain after a time. You shouldn't have to. Impulsively, Serafina raised her hand to his face, her fingertips gently touching the skin beside the crown. Where they made contact, Magnus inhaled sharply. "What did you do?" he asked, wonder replacing pain in his expression. "Created a barrier, temporary, but real, between you and the crown's burning influence." Serafina hadn't known she could perform such a feat until the moment she attempted it. The knowledge came with the fragment's union. "Remarkable," Magnus murmured. For a brief moment, the weight of centuries seemed to lift from his shoulders, the perpetual tension in his powerful frame easing. Then, with visible effort, he reasserted his customary self-control. "But we cannot linger. Dawn approaches, and with it, our journey to the Temple of First Moon." Serafina nodded, carefully securing the merged fragment on its leather cord around her neck. As they turned to leave the treasury, a sudden commotion echoed from the corridor beyond, shouts of alarm, followed by the distinctive sound of steel meeting steel. Magnus moved with preternatural speed, placing himself between Serafina and the entrance. Storm growled, hackles rising as the Ancient One took a protective stance. Captain Thorne burst through the treasury doors, blood streaming from a gash across his forehead. "Your Majesty," he gasped. "Betrayal! Roland's forces have breached the southern gate. Someone lowered the defenses from within." "How many?" Magnus demanded, already moving toward the exit with Serafina and Storm close behind. "At least 500, sire. They moved directly for the central keep, bypassing other objectives." "They know we seek the fragments," Serafina realized. "Malloran must have communicated our plans to Roland." "The Eastern Passage," Magnus decided immediately. "It leads to the old Huntmaster's tunnel, beyond the walls. We can still reach the temple before Roland's main force arrives." As they hurried through the labyrinthine corridors beneath the castle, the sounds of battle grew louder above them. Loyal guards fought to hold strategic positions, buying time for their king's escape. The knowledge that wolves died for their mission weighed heavily on Serafina's conscience. "We cannot simply abandon them," she said, as they reached a narrow stone passage that sloped gradually upward. "We aren't abandoning anyone," Magnus replied grimly. "If we fail to secure the fragments, if Roland and Malloran complete their ritual during the blood moon, the entire kingdom falls, not just those fighting today." "The needs of the many against the needs of the few," Serafina murmured, understanding but not liking the calculus of such decisions. "The burden of rule," Magnus confirmed. "One never grows accustomed to it, no matter how many centuries pass." The tunnel eventually opened into a small hunting lodge half a mile beyond the castle walls. As they emerged into the gray light of early dawn, Serafina glanced back at Northcrest Castle, rising majestically against the sky, now with ominous smoke rising from its southern quarter. "Captain Thorne knows the rendezvous point," Magnus assured her, noting her concerned gaze. "If he survives, he'll meet us with reinforcements at the temple." "And if he doesn't?" Magnus's expression hardened. "Then we face what comes alone." 2 horses waited at the lodge, saddled and provisioned, evidence of Thorne's efficient planning. Magnus helped Serafina mount before swinging easily into his own saddle. "Storm will follow our trail," he explained as the Ancient One disappeared into the forest underbrush. "He travels faster alone and will serve as both scout and rearguard." With a final glance toward the embattled castle, they turned their mounts eastward, toward the rising sun and the Temple of First Moon, where the ruby fragment awaited. Behind them, Roland's forces secured their foothold in the capital, and somewhere in the shadows, Malloran prepared for the coming blood moon ritual that would reshape the wolf crown forever. Unless they stopped him first. The Temple of First Moon perched on a windswept mountainside 3 days' ride from Northcrest Castle. Ancient and weathered, its stone columns had witnessed the rise and fall of countless alpha lines, standing silent sentinel over ceremonies that modern wolves had largely forgotten. According to the knowledge flooding Serafina's mind from the united fragments, this temple had been built by the earliest wolves to mark the spot where their kind had first shifted from animal to something more, neither fully beast nor fully human, but a unique bridge between worlds. Here, the first pacts between Alpha and Soulkeeper had been sworn, establishing the balance that would guide wolfkind for generations. Before that balance had been systematically destroyed. "It feels sacred," Seraphina said as they approached the crumbling edifice, their horses picking their way carefully up the narrow mountain path. "It is," Magnus confirmed, though few remember why. Most modern wolves view it merely as a historical curiosity, if they think of it at all. His golden eyes scanned the temple ruins with a warrior's assessment. No signs of disturbance. We may have arrived ahead of Roland's forces. Storm had rejoined them an hour earlier, the Ancient One appearing silently from the forest to lope alongside their mounts. Now he paused, nose raised to the wind, testing the air for threats. "He senses nothing unusual," Seraphina translated, her connection to the ancient wolf growing stronger with each passing hour, "but remains cautious nonetheless." They dismounted at the temple entrance, securing their horses before proceeding on foot. The structure's original grandeur had faded with time. Columns cracked and walls partially collapsed, yet power still resided here. Seraphina felt it thrumming beneath her feet, responding to the merged fragment at her throat. According to the Alpha spirits, the ruby fragment lies beneath the altar of sacrifice, Magnus recalled, leading the way into the temple's main chamber, though they did not specify exactly how to access it. The chamber opened before them, a circular space with a domed ceiling now partially open to the sky. At its center stood a stone altar, its surface stained dark with the blood of ancient rituals. 7 niches in the surrounding walls had once held statues representing the original Alpha clans, though only weathered pedestals remained. Seraphina approached the altar slowly, the merged fragment growing warmer against her skin with each step. When she stood directly before it, the crystal flared with brilliant light, illuminating ancient runes carved into the altar's surface, symbols invisible until that moment. "Protection sigils," she said, knowledge flowing from the fragment to her consciousness. Designed to hide the ruby fragment from any but a soul-keeper's perception. She placed her palm flat against the altar stone. The runes responded to her touch, glowing first emerald, then topaz, creating a cascading pattern across the surface that spread down the altar's sides to the floor beneath. The stone floor around the altar trembled, then began to recede, sections sliding away to reveal a spiraling staircase descending into darkness. "The inner sanctum," Seraphina breathed, where the most sacred rituals were performed, hidden from all but the highest-ranking Alphas and Soulkeepers. Magnus drew closer, the wolf crown seeming to pulse with anticipation. "The Alpha spirits grow restless," he said, one hand rising to touch the metal circlet. "They recognize this place, remember ceremonies performed here centuries ago." Storm growled softly, his massive form tense as he studied the revealed passage. The Ancient One clearly disapproved of whatever awaited below. "Your guardian senses danger," Magnus observed. "Not danger exactly," Seraphina clarified, interpreting Storm's reaction. "More uneasiness. The Ancient Ones were never comfortable with the inner sanctum. It represented a formalization of power they believed should remain wild and free. Yet we must descend," Magnus concluded. "The ruby fragment awaits, and with it, another piece of the heart restored." Seraphina nodded, taking the first step onto the ancient staircase. The merged fragment provided sufficient light to guide their way, illuminating stone steps worn smooth by countless feet over millennia. The descent took longer than expected, the spiral staircase winding deep into the mountain's heart. When they finally reached the bottom, a vast chamber opened before them, perfectly circular, its walls inlaid with precious metals that caught and reflected the fragment's light. At the chamber's center stood a crystalline structure resembling a tree, its branches extending toward the high ceiling, its roots disappearing into the stone floor. And nestled within the crystal tree's heart, pulsing with ruby light, was the third fragment of the Soulkeeper's heart. "The Tree of Balance," Seraphina whispered, reverence filling her voice. "Created from the tears of the first Soulkeeper and the blood of the first Alpha, a living symbol of their eternal bond." "I've never seen its like," Magnus said, equally awed despite his centuries of existence. "Such magic belongs to an age long past." They approached the crystal tree cautiously, Storm remaining close to Seraphina's side. As they neared, the tree seemed to respond to their presence, a soft hum emanating from its crystalline branches. The ruby fragment at its center pulsed more rapidly, calling to its siblings around Seraphina's neck. "How do we retrieve it?" Magnus asked, studying the seamless crystal surrounding the fragment. Seraphina knew the answer without needing to search the fragment's knowledge. Blood freely given, she said. Alpha and Soul Keeper, united in purpose. She extended her hand to Magnus. We both must offer blood to the tree, together. Without hesitation, Magnus drew a small knife from his belt. With precise movements, he made a shallow cut across his palm, then offered the blade to Seraphina. She mirrored his action, opening a thin line across her own palm. When both wounds wept freely, they clasped hands, mixing their blood before pressing their joined palms against the crystal tree's trunk. The effect was immediate and dramatic. The tree's hum intensified, its crystalline structure vibrating at a frequency that resonated with the merged fragment. Cracks appeared in the previously flawless surface, spreading outward from where their bloody handprints marked the trunk. With a sound like breaking glass, but musical, almost joyful, the crystal surrounding the ruby fragment shattered, leaving the crimson stone floating in midair at the tree's heart. "It's offering itself to you," Magnus said softly. Seraphina reached forward with her free hand, her fingers closing around the ruby fragment. Heat coursed through her arm, intense but not painful, as the fragment recognized its rightful bearer. "This one contains the knowledge of the healer lineage," she said, information flowing into her mind from the ruby crystal. Soul keepers who specialized in mending body, mind, and spirit, healers of both wolves and the land itself. Magnus released her other hand, allowing her to bring the ruby fragment toward the merged emerald and topaz at her throat. "Another union?" "Yes," Seraphina confirmed. "With each fragment joined, my abilities grow stronger, more defined. We'll need every advantage against Malaran." She pressed the ruby fragment against the merged crystal. Once again, light erupted from between her fingers, emerald, topaz, and ruby swirling together in a dance of power and purpose. The sensation was even more overwhelming than before, causing Seraphina to gasp as new knowledge and abilities flooded her consciousness. Storm pressed against her legs, the Ancient One's solid presence anchoring her as the transformation completed. When the light finally subsided, a single crystal remained, larger still, its internal glow now shifting between three distinct colors. "3 fragments united," Seraphina said, her voice stronger, more resonant than before. 4 remain separate. "And you grow stronger with each union," Magnus observed, studying her with those penetrating golden eyes. "Your aura has changed, deeper, more complex." Before Seraphina could respond, Storm's head snapped up, ears flattening against his skull as a growl rumbled from his massive chest. The Ancient One's gaze fixed on the staircase they had descended. "We have company," Magnus said grimly, his enhanced senses detecting what Seraphina now perceived as well, the approach of multiple wolves, their intent hostile. "Roland's forces?" Seraphina asked, though she already suspected the answer. "Unlikely they could have tracked us so quickly." Magnus moved toward the stairs, positioning himself between the approaching threat and Seraphina. "More probably Maloran's agents, sent to secure the fragment before we could reach it." "Too late for that," Seraphina said, touching the united crystal at her throat. "But they could still prevent us from reaching the remaining fragments." As if summoned by her words, dark shapes appeared at the staircase entrance, wolves unlike any Seraphina had seen before. Their fur seemed composed of shadow rather than hair, their eyes glowing with the same violet energy that characterized Maloran's magic. Not living wolves, but constructs of sorcery, created for a single purpose. Shadow wolves. Magnus identified them, his form already beginning the shift to his wolf aspect. Malaran's specialty. Mindless hunters that track by magical signature. They've locked onto the fragment's energy. Storm launched forward without waiting for instruction, the Ancient One's massive form colliding with the first shadow wolf to reach the chamber floor. The construct dissolved into violet mist upon impact, only to reform seconds later, apparently undamaged. "Physical attacks alone won't stop them," Magnus warned, completing his transformation. The wolf crown remained fixed above his lupine head, ruby eyes glowing with anticipation of battle. They must be disrupted magically. Seraphina felt knowledge rise from the united fragments, techniques used by ancient soul keepers to counter such magical constructs. Without conscious thought, her hand rose, fingers splayed toward the approaching shadow wolves. The crystal at her throat flared brilliantly, channeling her intent into focused power. By earth and air, by blood and bone, creatures of shadow be undone, she intoned, words flowing from memories not her own. Return to void from whence you came, your purpose thwarted, your binding broken. Emerald, topaz, and ruby light erupted from her extended hand, forming a wave that washed over the shadow wolves. Where it touched them, their shadowy forms hissed and steamed, violet energy dispersing like smoke in strong wind. Magnus seized the opportunity, lunging forward with supernatural speed to tear through the weakened constructs. Storm followed his example, the Ancient One's teeth finding purchase where moments before they had passed through insubstantial shadow. Together they made quick work of Malaran's creations. As the last shadow wolf dissolved into nothingness, Magnus shifted back to human form, breathing heavily from the exertion. "Impressive spell work," he commented, genuine admiration in his voice. "The Soul Keepers of old were formidable indeed." "And now we know Malaran is aware of our location," Seraphina pointed out. "We should leave quickly before he sends something more dangerous than shadow wolves." They ascended the spiral staircase with haste, emerging into the temple's main chamber to find the sun high overhead. Hours had passed during their time in the inner sanctum, though it had seemed like minutes. "Which fragment should we pursue next?" Magnus asked as they hurried toward where their horses waited. "The Moonwater Falls lie 2 days' ride south. The fragments beyond the ice mountains would take weeks to reach, if they still exist at all." "The falls," Seraphina decided, mounting her horse with newfound grace, another benefit of the fragment's union. "The sapphire fragment of the Protector lineage awaits us there. With 4 fragments united, I might stand a chance against Malaran during the Blood Moon ritual." "If we can reach it in time," Magnus cautioned, swinging into his own saddle. "Roland's main force will have secured the capital by now. His scouts will spread throughout the kingdom searching for us." "Then we ride hard and fast," Seraphina said, determination stealing her voice. "The blood moon rises in 9 days. We cannot fail." As they spurred their mounts down the mountain path, Storm loping effortlessly alongside, Seraphina felt the weight of prophecy settling more firmly upon her shoulders. Each united fragment brought not only increased power, but greater clarity regarding her purpose: to restore balance to a world long dominated by Alpha Force, unchecked by Soulkeeper wisdom. And perhaps, though she dared not voice it even to herself, to free Magnus from the crown that had imprisoned him for 2 centuries, to give him the choice that had been stolen from him by Malaran's curse. The thought of Magnus free from his burden quickened her heart in a way that had nothing to do with their desperate mission and everything to do with the connection growing between them. A bond both ancient and new, prophesied yet unexpected. As if sensing her thoughts, Magnus glanced toward her, golden eyes meeting hers briefly before returning to the path ahead. In that momentary contact, Seraphina glimpsed something beyond the dutiful king, the immortal Alpha, a man who, despite centuries of existence, still harbored hope for something he'd long believed impossible. Freedom, connection, perhaps even love. Such thoughts would have to wait. The sapphire fragment called, and with it, another piece of her destiny. The journey to Moonwater Falls proved more perilous than anticipated. Twice they encountered patrols flying Roland's banner, forcing them to hide until danger passed. Once, a flock of ravens with violet glowing eyes tracked them for miles. Malaran's spies, according to Magnus, who finally dispatched them with well-aimed arrows enhanced by Seraphina's magic. By nightfall of the 2nd day, they crested a ridge overlooking a magnificent waterfall that plunged hundreds of feet into a pool of such perfect blue it seemed composed of liquid sapphire. The surrounding forest pressed close to the water's edge, ancient trees standing sentinel over one of nature's wonders. "Moonwater Falls," Magnus announced, relief evident in his voice. "Named for the way moonlight transforms the pool on clear nights. The water is said to have healing properties for our kind." "The sapphire fragment enhances those properties," Seraphina added, knowledge flowing from the united crystal at her throat. "It lies encased in crystal at the pool's bottom, accessible only to one with Soulkeeper blood." They made camp in a sheltered hollow some distance from the falls, deciding to approach the pool at midnight when the moon's light would be strongest. As Magnus built a small, carefully hidden fire, Seraphina stretched her enhanced senses outward, searching for any sign of pursuit or danger. "We're alone for now," she reported, settling beside the fire, "though I sense something watching from the forest, not malevolent, merely curious." "Forest guardians," Magnus explained, arranging their meager provisions. "Ancient spirits bound to these woods. They rarely interfere with travelers unless the trees themselves are threatened." Storm had disappeared into the surrounding forest, the Ancient One preferring to keep watch from concealment. His absence left Seraphina and Magnus truly alone for the first time since their journey began. A comfortable silence fell between them as they shared the simple meal. Finally, Magnus spoke, his deep voice thoughtful. "You've changed since we first met in the moonlit clearing," he observed, "not just in power, but in confidence, in purpose." Seraphina considered this assessment. "The fragments bring knowledge and abilities, yes, but perhaps more significantly, they bring clarity. For the first time in my life, I understand why I never quite belonged, not among humans, not among wolves. Because you were meant for something greater than either world alone," Magnus suggested. "A bridge between powers, as soul keepers have always been." "Perhaps." She studied him across the small fire. "And you, Magnus? 400 years of existence, 2 centuries bearing the crown's curse. What clarity has time brought you?" A shadow passed across his handsome features. "That power without purpose becomes its own prison. That immortality without connection is a hollow victory over death." His golden eyes reflected the dancing flames. "That perhaps the crown's curse was as much about isolation as pain, cutting me off from any who might have shared my burden." "Until now," Seraphina said softly. "Until now," Magnus agreed, meeting her gaze directly. Something electric passed between them, an acknowledgement of the connection neither had voiced, but both increasingly felt. The united crystal at Seraphina's throat pulsed with sudden warmth, as if responding to the unspoken emotions. Magnus's eyes dropped to it, then rose again to her face. "The fragments respond to you," he noted. "Not just to your blood or your lineage, but to you, Seraphina, your heart, your spirit. That suggests the legends are true. That soul keepers were chosen not merely for heredity, but for qualities of character." "As were alphas once," she replied, "before power became its own justification." "Yes." Magnus absently touched the wolf crown, which never left his head even in repose. "The 7 original alphas were chosen for their wisdom as much as their strength. The crown was meant to preserve those qualities, to ensure that leadership remained balanced, before Maloran's curse twisted its purpose. Before that, and before generations of alphas rejected Soulkeeper guidance." Magnus's expression turned somber. "My ancestors bear as much responsibility for our current situation as Maloran. Their fear of limitation, of sharing power, led them to hunt Soulkeepers to near extinction. Yet here we sit," Seraphina gestured between them, "Alpha and Soulkeeper, attempting to restore what was broken. Perhaps the cycle can be ended." "Perhaps." Magnus's voice held cautious hope, though what comes after, if we succeed, remains uncertain. Before Seraphina could respond, Storm materialized from the darkness, the Ancient One's approach so silent that even Magnus with his enhanced senses hadn't detected it. The massive wolf carried something in his jaws, a small leather pouch, which he deposited at Seraphina's feet before sitting back on his haunches, green eyes watchful. "What's this?" Seraphina asked, picking up the pouch. It was old but well-preserved, the leather soft with age and use. "That's—" Magnus leaned forward, recognition dawning. "That's a messenger pouch bearing the royal seal. Captain Thorne's, if I'm not mistaken." Seraphina opened the pouch carefully, extracting a folded parchment sealed with wax. She broke the seal and unfolded the message, holding it toward the firelight to read Thorne's precise handwriting. "Your Majesty and Lady Seraphina," she read aloud, "Roland's forces have secured the capital and declared you deposed for abandoning the kingdom in its hour of need. Half the council supports his claim, the other half imprisoned or fled. Maloran openly directs Roland's actions now, preparing for the blood moon ritual in the old northern temple." Magnus's expression darkened with each word. "Thorne? Escaped with a company of loyal guards," Seraphina continued reading. "They make for the western range to free the remaining slaves and disrupt moonstone shipments. He urges us to proceed with our quest for the fragments and promises to meet us before the blood moon rises, if fate allows." "Loyal to the end," Magnus murmured. "Few such men remain in these cynical times." Seraphina folded the parchment thoughtfully. "The situation grows dire. Roland controls the capital, Maloran gathers moonstone for the ritual, and we have but 7 days until the blood moon. Yet we've secured 3 fragments and approach a 4th, Magnus pointed out, Our position strengthens with each success. As does Malloran's, Serafina countered. He consolidated power while we journeyed here, gathered allies, spread falsehoods about your abandonment of the throne. Politics, Magnus dismissed with a wave of his hand. Meaningless if the ritual succeeds. If Roland wears an enhanced wolf crown with no soul keeper to balance its power, no amount of political maneuvering will matter. Storm growled in agreement, the Ancient One's green eyes reflecting firelight as he turned his gaze toward the distant falls, a clear message that they should focus on their immediate task. Your guardian is right, Magnus acknowledged, rising to his feet. The moon nears its zenith. We should approach the falls now. They doused their fire and gathered only what they might need at the pool. Serafina's small belt knife for potential blood offerings, a length of rope should the crystal case prove difficult to retrieve, and a leather satchel to secure the fragment once obtained. The forest path to the falls wound through ancient trees whose branches seemed to part before them, as if the forest guardians Magnus had mentioned approved of their quest. When they emerged from the tree line, the falls spread before them in all their moonlit glory, water cascading down black rock face to strike the pool below with thunderous force. Just as Magnus had described, moonlight transformed the already beautiful scene into something otherworldly. The pool glowed with internal light, not merely reflecting the moon, but somehow amplifying its radiance. At the pool's center, Serafina could perceive what ordinary eyes would miss, a deeper blue glow emanating from beneath the water's surface. The sapphire fragment, she breathed, the united crystal at her throat pulsing in recognition. It calls to its siblings. Without hesitation, she began removing her outer garments, preparing to enter the pool. "What are you doing?" Magnus asked, though the answer seemed obvious. "I must retrieve the fragment," Serafina explained, now clad only in her thin undershirt and leggings. According to the knowledge within the united fragments, only a soul keeper can pass through the crystal casing that protects it. "The water is freezing," Magnus pointed out. "Even with your enhanced nature, prolonged immersion could prove dangerous." "Then I'd best be quick about it." Serafina's tone brooked no argument. Before Magnus could object further, she waded into the pool, gasping as icy water enveloped her legs, then her waist. Strangely, after the initial shock, the cold seemed to recede. The water felt almost welcoming, embracing rather than chilling her. The united crystal glowed brilliantly as she moved deeper, illuminating her path toward the central glow. When the water reached her shoulders, Serafina took a deep breath and dove beneath the surface. Opening her eyes underwater, she discovered she could see with perfect clarity, another gift from the fragments. The sapphire glow guided her downward, toward a crystal formation on the pool's bottom that resembled a perfect cube, within which the fragment pulsed with sapphire light. Serafina extended her hand toward the cube, remembering the Alpha Spirit's words, "Encased in crystal that only Soulkeeper touch can melt." Her fingertips made contact with the transparent surface, which felt like ice despite its crystalline appearance. Immediately, the crystal began to dissolve, melting away from her touch like snow in spring sunshine. Within moments, the sapphire fragment floated free, rising slightly in the water as if eager to join its siblings. Serafina grasped it carefully, feeling the now familiar surge of power and knowledge as her skin made contact with the ancient crystal. This fragment contained the collected wisdom of the Protector lineage, soul keepers who specialized in defensive magic, in shielding both individuals and entire territories from harm. Her lungs beginning to burn, Serafina kicked upward, the sapphire fragment clutched tightly in her hand. She broke the surface with a gasp, drawing precious air into her lungs as she oriented toward the shore where Magnus waited, tension evident in his powerful frame. "I have it," she called, swimming one-handed toward him. Relief washed over Magnus's features as he waded into the shallows to help her the final distance. His strong hands grasped her waist, lifting her effortlessly from the water and setting her gently on her feet. For a moment, they stood close enough that Serafina could feel the heat radiating from his body, a stark contrast to the icy pool. His golden eyes searched hers, concern and something deeper, more personal, evident in their depths. "You're freezing," he said, though in truth Serafina felt strangely energized rather than chilled. Before she could explain this, Magnus had removed his cloak and wrapped it around her shoulders, the heavy fabric still warm from his body. "Thank you," she said, touched by the gesture. "But I'm not as cold as I should be. The pool, It recognized me somehow, protected me. The sapphire fragment's influence, perhaps. Magnus nodded toward her closed fist. May I see it? Seraphina opened her hand, revealing the sapphire fragment nestled in her palm. Like the others, it was perfectly cut, approximately the size of a large grape, and pulsed with internal light, a deep, rich blue that seemed to contain the essence of protective magic. The united crystal at her throat responded immediately, glowing more intensely as it sensed its siblings' proximity. Seraphina felt the now familiar urge to combine them, to add the sapphire's power to the growing union. Another merger? Magnus asked, reading her intent in her expression. Yes, Seraphina confirmed. 4 fragments united will bring us one step closer to the complete heart and to my full awakening as a prime soul keeper. Without further discussion, she pressed the sapphire fragment against the united crystal. The resulting light show surpassed all previous mergers. Emerald, topaz, ruby, and sapphire energies swirling together in a miniature aurora that illuminated the entire clearing around the pool. Magnus stepped back, shielding his eyes from the intensity, while Storm watched impassively, the Ancient One seemingly unaffected by the display. The sensation of power flowing into Seraphina intensified beyond anything she had previously experienced, new knowledge and abilities flooding her consciousness with almost overwhelming force. When the light finally subsided, a single crystal remained, significantly larger than before, its internal glow now cycling through 4 distinct colors in perfect harmony. 4 fragments united, Seraphina said, her voice carrying a new resonance that seemed to vibrate in the very air around them. 3 remained separate. And you? Magnus studied her with those penetrating golden eyes. How are you changed by this union? Seraphina took stock of her altered self. Beyond the expected enhancement to her senses and the influx of ancient knowledge, she now perceived the world in ways that transcended ordinary understanding. The forest around them revealed itself as a complex web of interconnected life forces. The falls and pool emanated power that had nothing to do with the fragment they had contained, and everything to do with the natural magic of the location itself. Most significantly, she perceived Magnus differently. Not just his physical presence or the crown's influence upon him, but the intricate tapestry of his essence. 4 centuries of experiences layered upon the core of who he truly was, beneath title and crown and curse, the good and ill he had done, the joy and sorrow he had known, the love he had given and received, all visible to her awakened perception. I see everything, she finally answered, struggling to articulate the profound shift in her understanding. The fragments don't just grant power, Magnus. They restore perception that our kind was always meant to possess, the ability to see beyond surface reality to the truth beneath. And what truth do you see in me? He asked quietly, as if both desiring and fearing her answer. Seraphina met his gaze directly. I see a good man bound to an impossible burden. I see strength tempered by wisdom hard-won through centuries of both triumph and error. I see someone who has sacrificed personal happiness for duty so many times that he's forgotten the two need not always conflict. She stepped closer, still wrapped in his cloak. Most of all, I see someone who deserves freedom, from the crown, from the curse, from the isolation that has been your prison far more effectively than any physical restraint could ever be. Magnus remained utterly still, his expression unreadable, save for the flicker of something vulnerable in those ancient golden eyes. For a moment, Seraphina thought he might reach for her, might bridge the small distance remaining between them. Instead, he took a deliberate step back, his features composing themselves into the mask of kingship he had worn for centuries. Dawn approaches, he said, his voice carefully controlled. We should return to camp and prepare for the journey back to Northcrest. With 4 fragments united, you stand a better chance against Maloran during the ritual. Magnus, Seraphina began, sensing his withdrawal and understanding its cause. Fear not of her power, but of the connection growing between them, a vulnerability the immortal king had not allowed himself for centuries. Before she could continue, Storm's head snapped up, the Ancient One's ears flattening against his skull as a growl rumbled from deep in his massive chest. Both Seraphina and Magnus immediately tensed, their enhanced senses extending outward to identify the threat. Riders, Magnus said grimly, at least a dozen, approaching fast from the south. Serafina concentrated, her newly enhanced perception reaching further than ever before. "Roland's men," she confirmed, "led by someone powerful, an alpha, though not Roland himself. One of his generals, I think." "We're vulnerable here in the open," Magnus assessed quickly. "We need to reach the forest where Storm can lead us through paths our pursuers cannot follow." They gathered their belongings with practiced efficiency, Serafina quickly donning her dried outer garments, while keeping Magnus's cloak wrapped around her shoulders. The united crystal she secured carefully around her neck, its glow muted now but still visible beneath her clothing. "Can you sense how close they are?" Magnus asked as they hurried toward the tree line. Serafina extended her perception again. "Less than 10 minutes behind us, riding hard. They must have picked up our trail yesterday and followed through the night." As they reached the forest edge, Storm suddenly froze, his massive head turning northward. A different threat approached from that direction. Serafina sensed it simultaneously with the Ancient One. "Shadow wolves," she warned. "At least 20, moving faster than natural wolves could travel. Malaran coordinates with Roland's forces, trapping us between physical and magical threats." Magnus cursed under his breath. "He anticipated our move for the sapphire fragment. The question is how, unless—" "Unless what?" Serafina prompted when he didn't continue. "Unless Malaran already possesses one of the remaining fragments," Magnus theorized. "The onyx fragment the Alpha spirits mentioned, the one in possession of one I know well. If Malaran holds it, he might use its power to track our movements." The implications chilled Serafina, despite her resistance to the pool's cold. "Then he could find us wherever we go." "Not necessarily," Magnus countered. "The fragment's power grows with union. Your 4 united crystals should override the tracking capability of his single fragment, if we can put sufficient distance between us." "Where do we go?" Serafina asked. "Roland controls the capital, Malaran hunts us with shadow wolves, and we're days away from any potential allies." Magnus's expression turned resolute. There is one place they would hesitate to follow, one sanctuary even Malaran might fear to violate. He met her gaze directly. "The heart of Shadowfall, where the Ancient Ones make their den." Storm rumbled what sounded like approval, the massive wolf's green eyes gleaming with sudden interest. "Storm can guide us there," Magnus continued. "It's 3 days hard travel northwest, assuming we can evade our current pursuers." The sound of approaching horses grew louder, while from the north, Serafina sensed the shadow wolves closing in with unnatural speed. "We have little choice," she acknowledged, "but first, we need to slow both pursuit groups." Drawing on the knowledge flowing from the united fragments, Serafina knelt and placed her palm flat against the forest floor. The crystal at her throat flared with multicolored light as she channeled its power downward into the very roots of the ancient trees surrounding them. "Guardians of leaf and bough, of root and branch," she intoned, words rising from memories not her own. "Protect those who protect the balance. Hinder those who would harm us. By the old pact between First Wolves and Forest Heart, I claim sanctuary and aid." The forest floor trembled beneath her hand. Throughout the surrounding woods, trees groaned and shifted, roots breaking free of earth to writhe like serpents across the ground. Ancient trunks bent and swayed, branches reaching downward with purpose rather than random motion. "The forest guardians answer your call," Magnus observed with undisguised wonder. "Another soul-keeper ability I've only heard described in legends. The protector lineage maintained special bonds with forest guardians," Serafina explained, knowledge flowing from the sapphire fragment most recently joined. "A partnership of mutual benefit. Soul Keepers protected forests from excessive exploitation, and forest guardians aided Soul Keepers in times of need." Storm nudged her urgently, indicating they should move while her magic worked to delay their pursuers. Serafina rose, slightly dizzy from the expenditure of power, but otherwise intact. "Lead on," she told the Ancient One. "Show us the path to safety." Storm didn't hesitate, plunging into the forest along a trail invisible to ordinary perception. Magnus and Serafina followed closely, trusting the Ancient One's instincts and ancient knowledge of these woods. Behind them, Serafina sensed chaos erupting as her forest magic took effect. Roland's riders encountered sudden impenetrable thickets where clear paths had existed moments before. Tree roots rose to trip horses, branches swept down to unseat riders. No permanent harm would come to them. The forest guardians were protectors, not killers, but their pursuit would be significantly delayed. From the north, the shadow wolves faced even greater resistance. Being magical constructs, they triggered the forest's deepest defensive instincts. Entire sections of woodland sealed themselves off, ancient trees forming impenetrable barriers that even shadow matter couldn't penetrate without Malaran's direct intervention. "Your magic buys us time," Magnus said as they jogged deeper into the forest, following Storm's lead. "But Malaran will eventually overcome the forest's defenses. We need to reach the horses and put as much distance as possible between us and our pursuers before nightfall." They traveled in tense silence after that, conserving breath and energy for the journey ahead. When they reached their campsite, they quickly gathered their remaining supplies and mounted their waiting horses. With Storm leading the way, they set off northwestward, toward the heart of Shadowfall Forest and the sanctuary of the Ancient One's den. The journey became a desperate race against both physical pursuers and the approaching blood moon. For 3 days they pushed themselves to the limit, stopping only when absolutely necessary for brief rest and sustenance. Storm proved an invaluable guide, leading them along hidden paths that seemed to appear and disappear as they traveled, ancient routes known only to the original wolf packs. On the 3rd day, as dusk approached, they crested a ridge overlooking a secluded valley unlike any Seraphina had ever seen. Where most of Shadowfall consisted of towering trees and dense underbrush, this valley featured open meadows interspersed with stands of silver-barked trees. A river wound through its center, fed by countless small springs that dotted the landscape. Most remarkably, wolves roamed freely throughout the valley. Not ordinary wolves, but ancient ones like Storm, their massive forms unmistakable even at a distance. Dozens, perhaps hundreds of them, living in a sanctuary hidden from the outside world for countless generations. "The heart of Shadowfall," Magnus breathed, genuine awe in his voice. "I've heard it described in our oldest texts, but never thought to see it with my own eyes. Few outsiders have ever been permitted entry." Storm led them down a winding path toward the valley floor. As they descended, Ancient Ones appeared alongside the trail, watching their approach with intelligent green eyes. Not threatening, but certainly assessing. "They recognize Storm," Seraphina observed, "but question his decision to bring us here." "Understandably," Magnus replied. The Ancient Ones withdrew from wider wolf society when the balance between Alpha and Soulkeeper was first broken. This sanctuary has remained untouched by the power struggles that have defined the outside world for centuries. When they reached the valley floor, a delegation of Ancient Ones approached. 5 massive wolves led by a silver-furred female whose presence radiated authority without aggression. Storm moved forward to meet her, and the two touched noses in greeting before engaging in what appeared to be silent communication. After several moments, Storm returned to Seraphina's side while the silver female approached. She stopped directly before Seraphina, green eyes studying her with ancient wisdom. "She is Luna, leader of the Ancient Ones," Seraphina said, understanding flowing from her connection to Storm. "She welcomes us to the heart of Shadowfall and offers sanctuary until the blood moon passes." Magnus inclined his head respectfully toward Luna. "We are grateful for your hospitality." Luna's gaze shifted to Magnus, focusing particularly on the wolf crown with what appeared to be disapproval. Then, with deliberate movements, she turned and began walking toward the center of the valley, clearly expecting them to follow. They proceeded on foot, leading their tired horses through meadows of silver-blue grass, unlike any that grew outside Shadowfall. Ancient Ones watched their passage with curious but not unfriendly eyes, many approaching to catch Seraphina's scent before retreating respectfully. "They recognize what you are," Magnus observed, a soul keeper awakening toward her prime state. "They've been waiting," Seraphina agreed, knowledge flowing from the united fragments. "The Ancient Ones preserved the old ways, the old knowledge, waiting for the day when balance might be restored." Luna led them to a crystal-clear pool fed by a small waterfall cascading down moss-covered rocks. Beside it stood a dwelling unlike any Seraphina had seen before. Not quite a cabin, not quite a cave, but something in between. Its walls appeared to be living wood grown into structured form, its roof a cascade of silver leaves that seemed to shimmer with their own internal light. "The Soulkeeper's Lodge," Seraphina identified it, recognition coming from the fragment's collective memory. built generations ago for visits from Soul Keepers who maintain the ancient alliance between their kind and the Ancient Ones. It has stood empty for too long, Magnus noted, yet appears perfectly maintained. Time passes differently here in the heart, Serafina explained, though the knowledge felt more intuitive than factual. The Ancient Ones exist partially outside normal time flow, one reason they've survived unchanged while other wolf species evolved. Luna made a soft chuffing sound, then turned and trotted away, leaving them to settle into the lodge. Storm remained, clearly intending to stay with Serafina. The interior of the Soul Keeper's lodge proved as remarkable as its exterior. A central living area featured comfortable furnishings crafted from living wood and soft textiles woven from materials Serafina couldn't identify. A hearth occupied one wall, already prepared with wood for a fire. Two smaller rooms branched off the main area, sleeping chambers with raised platforms covered in soft furs. Extraordinary, Magnus said, examining the seamless construction. Built without cutting a single tree or using a single nail, pure cooperative growth between Soul Keeper and forest. The Ancient Ones have preserved much that the outside world has forgotten, Serafina agreed, setting down her pack and moving to light the hearth fire. This lodge was created specifically for Soul Keepers traveling between territories, a neutral space where they could rest and replenish their energy. As flames caught and spread among the prepared logs, Magnus settled on one of the comfortable seats, his powerful frame seeming to relax for the first time in days. The wolf crown, however, appeared more agitated than usual, its ruby eyes gleaming with unusual intensity. The crown dislikes this place, Serafina observed. The alpha spirits sense the Ancient One's disapproval, Magnus confirmed, one hand rising to touch the metal circlet. This valley represents everything they turned away from: balance, cooperation, limitation of individual power for collective benefit. Yet you brought us here, because we need allies, and safety until the blood moon. Magnus's golden eyes reflected the growing firelight. And because I've lived long enough to recognize when ancient ways might hold wisdom my more recent ancestors rejected. Serafina joined him near the fire, the united crystal at her throat pulsing with gentle rhythm that matched the flame's dance. For several minutes, they sat in comfortable silence, the stress and danger of recent days gradually easing from their bodies. 5 days remain until the blood moon, Magnus finally said. Time enough for you to rest and adapt to the increased power from the 4 united fragments. And to plan our next move, Serafina added. Roland controls the capital, Maloran prepares the ritual, and the remaining fragments lie beyond our immediate reach. The onyx fragment in Maloran's possession is our greatest concern, Magnus mused. If we're correct about him using it to track us, he may eventually locate even this sanctuary. The Ancient Ones would defend their home, Serafina said, certainty flowing from her connection to Storm, who had settled by the hearth. At great cost, Magnus pointed out. Shadow wolves can be reconstructed endlessly. Ancient Ones once lost are irreplaceable. Serafina touched the united crystal thoughtfully. With 4 fragments joined, I might be strong enough to counter Maloran's magic directly, to shield this valley from his perception, at least temporarily. Worth attempting, Magnus agreed. Though I suggest you rest first. The sapphire joining clearly demanded significant energy, and your forest magic thereafter more still. As if his words had unleashed her body's awareness of its own exhaustion, Serafina suddenly felt the accumulated fatigue of days of hard travel and magical exertion. Her eyelids grew heavy, her limbs leaden. Rest, Magnus urged gently. I'll keep watch, and Storm besides. You're safe here, Serafina. Too tired to argue, she nodded and rose, making her way to one of the sleeping chambers. The furs covering the raised platform proved incredibly soft, enveloping her in comfort she hadn't experienced since leaving Northcrest Castle. As sleep claimed her, Serafina's last thoughts were of Magnus, the vulnerability he'd briefly revealed at Moonwater Falls, the connection growing between them despite his attempts to maintain distance, and the inevitable confrontation with Maloran that loomed before them. Would 4 fragments united prove sufficient against a sorcerer who had planned his vengeance for centuries? Could they stop the blood moon ritual without the complete heart restored? And if they succeeded, what then for a soul keeper awakened and an alpha king who had known no existence beyond the crown's burden for 200 years? Such questions would wait for morning. For now, protected by Ancient Ones in their hidden valley, Serafina surrendered to dreamless sleep, the first truly peaceful rest she had known since her awakening began. In the 5 days that followed, the heart of Shadowfall became both sanctuary and training ground. Under Luna's watchful guidance, Seraphina explored the United Fragment's growing power, learning to channel abilities from all 4 Soulkeeper lineages: Bearer, Healer, Protector, and her own prime bloodline. Magnus observed these training sessions with evident fascination, occasionally offering insights from his centuries of experience with magic and power. Though he maintained a certain physical distance, Seraphina sensed the walls around his emotions gradually thinning, his golden eyes following her movements with undisguised admiration, and something deeper he still refused to name. On the 4th day, as Seraphina practiced manipulating the energy patterns connecting all living beings in the valley, Luna approached with unusual purpose. The silver female made a series of soft vocalizations that Storm immediately translated through his connection to Seraphina. "Luna wishes to show you something," Seraphina relayed to Magnus, who had been meditating nearby. "Something important, hidden even from most ancient ones." Magnus rose gracefully, his powerful frame moving with the fluid economy of motion that came from centuries of physical discipline. "I am honored by her trust." Luna led them deeper into the valley than they had previously ventured, past meadows where young ancient ones played under watchful eyes of elders, through groves of silver-barked trees whose leaves seemed to sing in the gentle breeze. Finally, they reached what appeared to be a solid rock face covered in vines and moss. Without hesitation, Luna pressed her massive head against a specific section of greenery, which parted like a curtain to reveal a hidden cave entrance. She entered without looking back, clearly expecting them to follow. Inside, the cave opened into a vast chamber, illuminated by bioluminescent fungi that cast an ethereal blue-green light across ancient stone walls. Seraphina gasped as she recognized the markings covering every available surface. The same runes and symbols that had adorned the Tree of Balance in the Temple of First Moon. The same ancient language preserved in the Soulkeeper Fragment's memories. "The Hall of Memories," she whispered, knowledge rising from the united crystal. "Where ancient ones recorded wolf history before writing was developed." "Before my kind learned to shift between forms," Magnus added, equally awed. "These markings must be thousands of years old." Luna proceeded to the chamber's center, where a raised stone platform stood. Upon it rested what appeared to be an ordinary river stone, smooth and gray, until Luna touched it with her nose. Immediately the stone began to glow with pure white light, illuminating the chamber far more brightly than the fungi alone. "The Remembrance Stone," Seraphina identified it, used by ancient ones to preserve memories beyond individual lifespans. She looked to Luna questioningly. "You wish us to see something specific?" Luna nodded her massive head once, then touched the stone again. This time, the white light expanded outward, forming 3-dimensional images in the air above the platform, a visual record of events long past. The images showed 7 alpha wolves and 7 soul keepers standing together in a circle. Between them floated 2 objects Seraphina recognized immediately: the complete soul keeper's heart, a perfect crystal sphere shifting through 7 distinct colors, and the original wolf crown before Maloran's curse had twisted it. As they watched, the ancient ceremony unfolded, Alpha and Soul Keeper working in perfect harmony to create these artifacts of power designed to maintain balance and protect all wolfkind from outside threats. The magic they wielded was neither purely alpha dominance nor Soul Keeper harmony, but a perfect blend that transcended both. The vision shifted forward in time, showing the gradual breakdown of this partnership. Alpha wolves growing drunk on their own power, Soul Keepers withdrawing as their counsel was increasingly ignored. The heart being shattered and its fragments distributed among the remaining Soul Keeper bloodlines for safekeeping. The crown remaining whole, but its purpose corrupted as alphas used it for personal gain rather than collective protection. Finally, the vision showed Maloran, younger but unmistakable, facing Magnus on the battlefield. The sorcerer's death, his final curse binding the 7 alpha spirits permanently to the crown and to Magnus himself. But the vision continued beyond what history recorded, showing something neither of them had known: Maloran's essence transferring to a prepared vessel nearby, a younger body waiting to receive his consciousness while his original form died at Magnus's hand. "He planned his apparent defeat," Magnus realized, his voice tight with anger. The curse wasn't a desperate final act, it was intentional all along. The vision concluded with a final image, the blood moon rising over Northcrest Castle, the wolf crown floating free of any wearer, suspended in violet energy, while 7 shadowy figures watched from a ritual circle. Malloran stood at the circle's edge, the onyx fragment glowing black in his hand as he directed the ceremony. As the vision faded, Luna turned her ancient gaze upon them both, expectation clear in her green eyes. "She wants us to understand what truly faces us," Seraphina said. "Not merely a power-hungry counselor and a vengeful sorcerer, but the culmination of a plan centuries in the making. Malloran never intended to destroy the crown. He means to reshape it entirely, to bind the 7 alpha spirits to his will alone. Creating a weapon of unprecedented power," Magnus concluded grimly. "No wonder the Ancient Ones preserved this knowledge. They understood what was at stake far better than my kind ever did." Luna made a soft sound, then used her nose to nudge the remembrance stone slightly, revealing what lay beneath it, a small depression in the platform containing a 5th crystal fragment, glowing emerald green like the first Seraphina had possessed. "Another fragment," Seraphina breathed, reaching toward it with trembling fingers. "The 2nd emerald, containing the other half of the prime lineage's knowledge." As her fingers closed around the crystal, the familiar surge of power and information flooded her consciousness, but stronger, more focused than any previous fragment. This piece contained not just knowledge, but specific instructions, preparations for the very situation they now faced. "The Ancient Ones have been guardians of this fragment for generations," she said, understanding flowing from the crystal itself. "Waiting for a prime soul keeper to awaken and reclaim it." "Which makes 5 fragments united," Magnus observed, the heart nearly complete. Seraphina didn't hesitate, bringing the new emerald fragment to the united crystal at her throat. The resulting merger surpassed all previous combinations in intensity, 5 distinct energies swirling together in perfect harmony, forming a crystal of significant size and power. The light show illuminated the entire chamber, casting their shadows in sharp relief against the ancient rune-covered walls. When it subsided, Seraphina stood transformed in ways both visible and unseen. Her physical appearance remained largely unchanged, but an aura of power now surrounded her, subtle but unmistakable, the awakened essence of a soul-keeper approaching her prime state. 5 fragments united, she said, her voice resonating with newfound authority. 2 remain separate, the amethyst beyond the ice mountains and the onyx in Malloran's possession. "How does this change our approach to the blood moon ritual?" Magnus asked, practical despite the wonder of what they had just witnessed. Seraphina touched the united crystal, which now pulsed with 5 distinct colors in perfect rhythm. "I can now create a direct counter to Malloran's ritual. Not merely disruption, but opposition. Soulkeeper balance against his attempt to eliminate balance entirely." Luna made a series of soft vocalizations that Storm translated through his connection to Seraphina. "Luna says the Ancient Ones will stand with us," Seraphina relayed. "They have remained apart from wolf politics for generations, but this threat transcends ordinary power struggles. If Malloran succeeds, the imbalance would eventually reach even this hidden valley." "A welcome alliance," Magnus acknowledged, inclining his head respectfully toward the silver female. "Though I fear what it may cost your people, Luna." The Ancient One leader merely gazed back at him steadily, acceptance of potential sacrifice evident in her ancient eyes. Some prices were worth paying to preserve what truly mattered. "The blood moon rises tomorrow night," Seraphina reminded them. "We must reach Northcrest Castle before Malloran begins the ritual." "We'll need help breaching the castle defenses," Magnus noted. "Roland will have the entire perimeter heavily guarded." As if in answer to his concern, a young Ancient One burst into the chamber, making urgent sounds directed at Luna. The silver female listened intently, then turned back to Seraphina and Magnus with what could only be described as a wolf's smile. "Riders approach the valley's edge," Seraphina translated. "Humans and shifted wolves together, flying no banner, but carrying a token bearing the royal seal." "Thorn," Magnus said with certainty. "He found us, as he promised." They followed Luna and the young messenger back through the cave system and toward the valley's edge. There, held respectfully but firmly at bay by a circle of Ancient Ones, stood Captain Thorn and approximately 50 royal guards, those who had remained loyal to Magnus despite Roland's usurpation. When Thorn spotted them approaching, relief washed over his weathered features. He knelt immediately, his men following suit. "Your Majesty," he greeted formally. "Lady Seraphina, we feared we might be too late." "Rise, old friend," Magnus commanded. "Your timing could not be better. The blood moon rises tomorrow night, and we must reach the capital before Malaran begins his ritual." As Thorn and his men stood, their eyes widened at the sight of so many ancient ones gathered around them, creatures of legend now standing as potential allies. "The situation at the capital?" Seraphina asked, moving directly to practical concerns. "Grim, my lady," Thorn reported. "Roland has declared himself regent until a proper alpha can be selected to wear the crown. Malaran operates openly now, preparing some grand ritual in the old northern temple that none may approach on pain of death." "And the people?" Magnus inquired. "Do they accept Roland's authority?" "They have little choice, sire. Those who spoke against him publicly disappeared in the night. Fear rules the capital now, not loyalty." Thorn's expression hardened. "But not all have forgotten their true king. We've gathered supporters throughout the territories, shifted wolves and humans alike who remember your just rule. They await only your signal to rise against the usurpers." "We cannot wait for a full uprising," Seraphina pointed out. "The ritual must be stopped tomorrow night, or all is lost regardless of popular support." "Then we strike directly at the heart," Magnus decided. "A small force, moving secretly into the capital through the old tunnels beneath the city, tunnels Roland likely knows nothing about. We target the northern temple where Malaran prepares his ritual." "And the ancient ones?" Thorn asked, glancing at the massive wolves surrounding them. Luna made a soft sound that Storm immediately translated. "They will create a diversion at the main gates," Seraphina relayed. "Something Roland's forces cannot ignore, drawing attention away from our true approach." The plan took shape quickly. Thorn's forces would divide, half creating additional diversions at strategic points around the city, while the remainder accompanied Magnus and Seraphina through the hidden tunnels. The Ancient Ones, led by Luna and Storm, would mount a spectacular but controlled attack on the main gates, careful to minimize casualties while maximizing chaos and distraction. "We depart at first light," Magnus announced when all details had been settled. "Rest while you can, for tomorrow we face not merely enemies but destiny itself." As the gathering dispersed, Seraphina found herself standing alone with Magnus at the edge of the ancient forest. The united crystal at her throat pulsed with gentle rhythm, its five-colored light illuminating their features in the gathering dusk. "Tomorrow everything changes," she said softly, "one way or another." "Yes." Magnus's golden eyes studied her face with unusual openness. "You've come so far from the half-blood tavern worker I first encountered in Shadowfall, grown into power few could imagine, let alone wield. And you've remembered there are some burdens that need not be carried alone," Seraphina countered gently. "After centuries of isolation." Magnus hesitated, then spoke with careful precision. "If we succeed tomorrow, if Malaran is defeated and the crown's curse broken, what then, Seraphina? What becomes of a soul keeper when balance is restored? What becomes of an alpha king whose identity has been bound to a crown for 2 centuries? The question contained layers beneath layers, not merely about their respective roles, but about the connection that had grown between them despite Magnus's attempts to maintain distance. "I don't know," Seraphina answered honestly. "The fragment's knowledge extends to restoring balance, not to what follows. Perhaps that future is not predetermined by ancient prophecy, but open to our own choices." "Choice," Magnus repeated, as if testing the word's weight. "A luxury I haven't truly experienced in 200 years. "Then perhaps that's the first gift of freedom," Seraphina suggested. "The opportunity to choose your own path forward, unburdened by curse or crown." Something vulnerable flickered in Magnus's ancient eyes, hope mingled with fear, longing tempered by centuries of cautious restraint. He took a half-step toward her, then stopped himself, the ingrained habit of isolation reasserting itself even now. "We should rest," he said finally, regaining his customary self-control. "Tomorrow demands all our strength and focus." Seraphina nodded, accepting his retreat without comment. "Until morning, then." As they turned to walk back toward the Soul Keeper's lodge, Magnus spoke again, so quietly she almost missed it. "Whatever comes after," he said, "I am grateful our paths crossed, Seraphina Hayes." "As am I, Magnus Blackthorn," she replied. "As am I." The following dawn brought clear skies and a sense of purpose that permeated the entire valley. Ancient Ones gathered in impressive numbers, their massive forms assembling near the northern ridge where Luna would lead them toward Northcrest Castle. Thorn's men prepared weapons and armor, their faces set with determination, born of loyalty to their rightful king. Seraphina stood outside the Soul Keeper's lodge, the united crystal pulsing strongly at her throat. 5 fragments joined, approaching the heart's complete power. Would it be enough against Maloran's centuries of planning? Against the Blood Moon's amplification of his dark sorcery? It would have to be. Magnus emerged from the lodge, his powerful frame adorned not in royal regalia, but in practical battle leathers that emphasized his warrior nature. The wolf crown remained upon his brow, ruby eyes gleaming with unusual intensity as the coming confrontation approached. "The crown senses what we attempt," he explained, noting Seraphina's questioning glance. The 7 alpha spirits grow restless, excited by the prospect of battle, yet fearful of potential freedom. Freedom that might mean their dissipation, Seraphina noted, if the curse is broken completely. Perhaps, or perhaps their return to the natural cycle they were removed from. Magnus adjusted a leather vambrace with practiced efficiency. Either way, their time of dominance nears its end, one way or another. Storm approached, the Ancient One's green eyes focused on Seraphina with clear expectation. Through their connection, she understood his message. "Storm will accompany us through the tunnels," she told Magnus. "Luna leads the main force, but he insists on remaining with me." "A guardian to the end," Magnus observed with evident respect for the massive wolf. His ancestors would be proud of his dedication. Their journey began without ceremony, necessity driving them forward, while time pressed inexorably toward the blood moon's rise. Thorn led the way from the heart of Shadowfall, guiding them along hidden trails until they reached the plains surrounding Northcrest Castle by midday. They separated there, Luna and the Ancient Ones circling west toward the main gates, half of Thorn's men spreading out to create diversions at key points around the city, while Magnus, Seraphina, Storm, and the remaining loyal guards approached from the east, where an inconspicuous cave entrance marked the beginning of the tunnels Thorn had mentioned. "These passages date from the castle's original construction," Magnus explained as they lit torches and entered the narrow tunnel. "Escape routes for the royal family should the castle ever fall to enemies. Few remember their existence now. I had them sealed and their locations removed from official records centuries ago." "Yet you remember them perfectly," Seraphina observed. 400 years of life has its advantages," Magnus replied with grim humor. Chief among them, an exceptional memory for potential escape routes. They proceeded in tense silence after that, conserving breath and focus for the challenges ahead. The tunnels wound beneath the city like stone arteries, occasionally branching into smaller passages before reuniting further along. Despite centuries without maintenance, they remained remarkably intact, a testament to the skill of their original builders. After what felt like hours but was likely less, they reached a vertical shaft with iron rungs embedded in one wall. Thorn went first, climbing cautiously to push aside the stone cover at the top and check for guards. "Clear," he whispered down. "We've emerged in the old storage cellars beneath the northern temple, as you predicted, Your Majesty." One by one, they climbed the shaft, emerging into a dusty chamber filled with broken furniture and forgotten ceremonial items. Storm required assistance, the Ancient One's massive form barely fitting through the opening, but soon their entire group stood assembled in the dim cellar. "The ritual chamber will be above," Magnus said quietly. "If Maloran follows traditional practice, he'll use the main worship space for the Blood Moon ceremony." "I sense powerful magic nearby," Seraphina confirmed, the united crystal responding to the energies permeating the temple. "And something else." She concentrated, extending her perception outward. "Captives, at least a dozen, held somewhere close. Their fear is palpable." "Sacrifices, most likely," Magnus concluded grimly. "Blood magic of this magnitude typically requires life essence to fuel its transformation." "Then we free them first," Seraphina decided, not only for their own sake, but to deprive Maloran of power sources for the ritual. No one argued with this assessment. Thorn positioned guards at the cellar entrance while they formulated their approach. The captives, according to Seraphina's enhanced perception, were being held in a chamber one level above them, while the main ritual preparations occurred 2 levels up in the temple's central worship space. The blood moon rises in approximately 3 hours, Magnus noted, gauging time from his internal senses. Malloran will begin preliminary invocations soon, but the ritual's critical phase cannot commence until the moon reaches its zenith. Then we move now, Seraphina said. Free the captives, disrupt the preparations, and confront Malloran before he can harness the blood moon's power. They proceeded with practiced stealth, ascending narrow stairs to the temple's ground floor. Evidence of Malloran's occupation was immediately visible. Arcane symbols painted on walls, ceremonial items arranged in specific patterns, and the lingering scent of incense mingled with something darker, metallic, blood already spilled in preliminary rites. Seraphina led them unerringly toward the captives, the united crystal guiding her through her enhanced perception. They encountered 2 guards outside a heavy wooden door, Roland's men, not shadow wolves. Thorn and his soldiers dispatched them quickly and silently. Behind the door, they found exactly what Seraphina had sensed: 14 individuals, mostly half-bloods like herself, bound with silver chains and bearing evidence of preliminary bloodletting. Among them, Seraphina recognized a familiar face. "Martha," she gasped, hurrying to the older woman's side. The tavern keeper looked up, recognition dawning slowly in her exhausted eyes. "Seraphina? By the moon, child, is it really you?" Her gaze moved to the united crystal visible at Seraphina's throat. "You found it, your mother's legacy." "And more besides," Seraphina confirmed, working quickly to free Martha from her chains. "We'll get you all out of here." "No time to explain in full," Magnus told the liberated captives as his men removed the last of their restraints. "You're being held for a blood ritual that would devastate the kingdom. Captain Thorn will guide you back through the tunnels to safety." "I'm staying," Martha announced, her voice weak but determined. "If this involves my Seraphina, I'm not running." Before anyone could argue, a tremendous roar echoed from outside the temple. Luna and her Ancient Ones had begun their diversion at the main gates. Moments later, shouts and the clash of weapons confirmed that Thorn's men had initiated their secondary diversions around the city. "That's our signal," Magnus said. "Thorn, get the others to safety. Martha stays if she insists. She may have information that could prove useful." He turned to Seraphina. "Are you ready to face Malloran?" The united crystal pulsed strongly at her throat. 5 fragments joined in harmony, approaching the heart's complete power. Seraphina nodded, determination stealing her features. "Ready." They proceeded upward toward the main worship chamber, Storm padding silently alongside. The sounds of battle grew louder outside, Luna's diversion clearly proving effective in drawing Roland's forces away from the temple. The temple's main chamber had been transformed for Malloran's purposes. The traditional altar had been replaced by a circular platform inscribed with complex magical sigils. 7 pedestals surrounded the platform, each bearing a small bowl filled with dark liquid, blood taken from the captives they had just freed. At the chamber's center, a raised dais had been prepared, presumably where the wolf crown would be placed during the ritual's climax. And standing before this arrangement, back turned to them as he made final adjustments to his preparations, was Malloran. "I've been expecting you," the sorcerer said without turning. "Though I admit you arrived sooner than anticipated. My shadow wolves should have delayed you longer in Shadowfall." "Your constructs found the Ancient Ones less accommodating than expected," Magnus replied, his voice carrying the authority of 4 centuries. Malloran turned slowly, his gaunt face illuminated by the violet energy crackling between his fingertips. Around his neck hung a crystal fragment that pulsed with obsidian light, the onyx fragment of the Soul Keeper's heart, corrupted by centuries of dark magic. "The Ancient Ones," he mused. "I wondered if they still existed beyond legend. How fascinating." His violet eyes fixed on Seraphina, narrowing as he perceived the united crystal at her throat. 5 fragments joined, impressive for an untrained half-blood. Your mother would be proud. "You knew my mother," Seraphina stated rather than asked. "I've known every Soul Keeper born in the past 2 centuries, Malloran replied with casual cruelty. "Known them, found them, and eliminated them, all save your mother, who cleverly hid among humans until giving birth to you. I found her eventually, of course, but not before she'd hidden both you and her fragment." Rage boiled in Seraphina's blood at this casual admission of murder, but she controlled it, channeling the emotion into the united crystal, which flared in response. "Your plans end tonight, Malloran," Magnus declared. "The ritual will not be completed." The sorcerer laughed. a dry, hollow sound devoid of humor. "Always so confident, Magnus. Always so certain of your own righteousness. 200 years wearing that crown, and you still don't understand its true purpose." "I understand well enough," Magnus countered. 7 alpha spirits bound against their will, their power harnessed for a single wearer's benefit. A corruption of the crown's original intent, balance between alpha strength and soul keeper wisdom. "Balance," Malloran spat the word like a curse. "A pretty lie told to keep true power divided and weakened. The crown was never meant for balance. It was meant for dominion. The 7 alpha spirits should be united under a single will, not fragmented across multiple consciousnesses." As he spoke, the temple doors behind them burst open. Roland entered, flanked by a dozen elite guards. The counselor's handsome face twisted with malice as he surveyed the scene. "So the rumors were true," he said, eyes fixed on Magnus. "The immortal king returns, bringing his pet soul keeper to challenge the natural order." "The natural order?" Seraphina couldn't contain her scorn. "You've enslaved half-bloods, murdered dissenters, and allied with a sorcerer who plans to use you as nothing more than a vessel." Roland's expression flickered with uncertainty at her final words. "Vessel? What nonsense is this? You haven't told him," Magnus addressed Malloran. "You've let him believe he would wear the crown after the ritual, that he would control the 7 alpha spirits." Malloran's thin lips curved into a cold smile. "Roland has served his purpose admirably. His ambition made him the perfect pawn to destabilize your rule, Magnus. But the enhanced crown requires a different kind of vessel, one I've spent centuries preparing." Understanding dawned in Roland's eyes, quickly replaced by fury. "You betrayed me," he snarled, drawing his sword. "All your promises of power, of immortality, lies." "Not lies," Malloran corrected calmly, "simply not meant for you." Before Roland could act on his rage, Malloran made a sharp gesture. Violet energy erupted from his fingertips, striking the counselor directly in the chest. Roland collapsed instantly, his body twitching in agony as dark magic coursed through his veins. "I still need your life essence for the ritual," Malloran explained to the writhing counselor, "just not your consciousness." The sorcerer turned back to Magnus and Seraphina. "Now where were we? Ah, yes. You were about to witness 2 centuries of planning come to fruition. The blood moon rises, the captive's preliminary essence has been collected, and I have Roland for the final sacrifice. All proceeds exactly as intended." "Except for one detail," Seraphina said, the united crystal flaring brightly at her throat. "You need the wolf crown itself, which remains firmly on Magnus's head." "For the moment," Malloran conceded. He raised one skeletal hand, revealing a small vial of silvery liquid. "Refined moonstone essence, extracted from the blood of hundreds of half-bloods. 1 drop will temporarily nullify the binding between Magnus and the crown, long enough for the ritual to commence." Storm growled, the Ancient One's hackles rising as he sensed the confrontation approaching its climax. Outside, the sounds of battle intensified, Luna's diversion drawing more of Roland's forces away from the temple. Seraphina glanced at Magnus, a silent communication passing between them. They had discussed this possibility during their planning, that Malloran might indeed have found a way to separate Magnus from the crown. Their contingency depended on timing and coordination more than raw power. "You've waited 2 centuries for revenge, Malloran," Magnus said, deliberately drawing the sorcerer's attention. "Why not explain your grand design before implementing it? Isn't that the traditional right of the victorious villain?" Malloran laughed again, apparently genuinely amused. "Playing for time, old friend? Very well, I'll indulge you, if only to ensure you understand the perfection of your defeat." As the sorcerer launched into his explanation, how he had transferred his consciousness between bodies over centuries, how he had systematically eliminated soul keepers to prevent balance from being restored, how he had manipulated events to reach this precise moment, Seraphina concentrated on the united crystal. 5 fragments joined, approaching the heart's complete power. Could it counter Malloran's moonstone essence? Could it protect Magnus from the crown's separation? She reached for the knowledge flowing from the fragments, seeking answers in the collective wisdom of generations of soul keepers. What she found was not a counterspell or protection ritual, but something simpler and more profound, the original purpose of the soul keeper's heart when paired with the wolf crown. Not opposition, not domination, but true harmony, each enhancing the other's natural strengths while mitigating weaknesses. And so, with the blood moon's power channeled through 7 sacrificial anchors, I will reshape the crown entirely, Malloran was saying, clearly enjoying his monologue. Not merely transferring it to a new host, but transforming its fundamental nature. The 7 alpha spirits will merge into a single consciousness, mine, amplified beyond anything this world has witnessed since wolves first learned to shift forms. You'll destroy the kingdom in the process, Magnus pointed out. The land itself responds to the crown's nature. Your corruption will accelerate the withering that has plagued us for generations. A small price for unlimited power, Malloran dismissed. New kingdoms can be conquered once the old has fallen. The temple trembled suddenly. Luna's ancient ones had broken through the main gates, their assault moving closer to the temple itself. Malloran glanced toward the windows, momentarily distracted. Seraphina seized the opportunity, channeling power through the united crystal directly to Magnus. Not a shield or barrier as she had attempted before, but something deeper. A resonance between Soulkeeper and Alpha, between the heart and crown as they were originally intended to function. Magnus gasped as the connection formed, golden eyes widening in surprise. The wolf crown responded immediately, ruby eyes flaring with new light that somehow seemed clearer, less malevolent than before. "What are you doing?" Malloran demanded, sensing the energy shift. He raised the vial of moonstone essence threateningly. "It changes nothing. The binding will still break." "Perhaps," Magnus acknowledged, "but not in the way you intend." Before Malloran could act, Magnus did the unthinkable. He reached up and removed the wolf crown from his own head. The action should have been impossible, should have triggered catastrophic magical backlash throughout the kingdom. Instead, the crown came away smoothly, the 7 wolf heads no longer burning against Magnus's skin. The ruby eyes remained alight, but their glow had transformed from angry red to something deeper, richer, the color of life rather than blood. "Impossible," Malloran whispered, genuine shock replacing his usual controlled demeanor. "The binding cannot be broken without the ritual." "Not broken," Seraphina corrected. "Harmonized, Soulkeeper and Alpha, heart and crown, as they were always meant to function. Not in opposition, not in dominance, but in perfect balance." Malloran's shock transformed instantly to fury. The vial of moonstone essence shattered in his clenched fist, liquid silver dripping between skeletal fingers to sizzle against the stone floor. 2 centuries of planning, he snarled. 2 centuries of patience and preparation. I will not be denied at the final moment. Violet energy erupted from his outstretched hands, a wave of destructive force directed at Magnus and Seraphina simultaneously. Storm leapt forward instinctively, interposing his massive body as a shield. But the Ancient One's loyalty, while admirable, proved unnecessary. The united crystal flared with blinding intensity, 5 distinct colors forming a protective barrier around both Seraphina and Magnus. Malloran's attack struck this barrier and reflected back upon him, violet energy meeting multicolored light in a spectacular collision that shook the temple to its foundations. Malloran staggered backward, momentarily overwhelmed by his own reflected power. The onyx fragment at his throat pulsed with increasing intensity, apparently responding to the united crystal's proximity. "The onyx calls to its siblings," Seraphina realized aloud. "It wants to rejoin the heart, even after centuries of corruption." "Never!" Malloran regained his balance, clutching the onyx fragment protectively. "This power is mine alone after generations of careful cultivation." "It was never yours to claim," Magnus stated, still holding the wolf crown in his hands. Just as the crown was never meant for a single wearer's benefit. Both heart and crown were created for balance, for harmony between different aspects of power. "Balance is weakness!" Malloran's form began to waver, violet energy crackling around him as his control slipped. "Unified power under singular will, that is the only path to true strength." "You're wrong," Seraphina said simply. "And your time has ended, Malloran. The cycle of vengeance stops tonight." She extended her hand toward the onyx fragment, calling to it directly through her connection to the united crystal. The response was immediate and dramatic. The onyx fragment tore itself from around Malloran's neck, shooting across the chamber to hover before Seraphina, pulsing with obsidian light that gradually shifted, cleansed by proximity to its sibling fragments. "No!" Malloran lunged forward, desperately reaching for the crystal that had been his for centuries. "You cannot take what is mine!" "It was never yours," Seraphina repeated Magnus's words. "Just as vengeance brings no true victory, only perpetuates cycles of hatred." Without hesitation, she brought the onyx fragment to the united crystal at her throat. The merger exceeded all previous combinations in intensity. 6 distinct energies swirling together, approaching the heart's complete form. Light erupted from between her fingers, filling the temple chamber with radiance so bright that even Magnus had to shield his eyes. When it subsided, a nearly complete crystal sphere pulsed at Seraphina's throat, 6 fragments united, lacking only the amethyst beyond the ice mountains. The power flowing through her transcended anything she had experienced before, ancient knowledge and abilities accessible with a mere thought. Malloran sank to his knees, his gaunt form seeming to age before their eyes as the onyx fragment's sustaining energy left him. 2 centuries, he whispered, voice cracking with genuine grief. 2 centuries of perfect planning. "It's over, Malloran," Magnus said, no triumph in his tone, merely finality. "Your vengeance has consumed enough lives, enough years." The sorcerer looked up, his violet eyes dimming to ordinary human brown. "What will you do, Magnus? Kill this body as you killed my original form? I'll simply transfer to another vessel, begin again. Our cycle continues eternally." "No," Seraphina stepped forward, the nearly complete heart pulsing gently at her throat. "There is another way." She knelt before the defeated sorcerer, her expression showing neither hatred nor pity, but simple determination. With gentle movements, she placed her hands on either side of Malloran's face, the heart's energy flowing through her fingertips. "By the power of 6 united fragments," she intoned, knowledge flowing from the heart to her lips. "By the balance between creation and destruction, between alpha strength and soulkeeper wisdom, I release you, Malloran, from the prison of your own making. I end the cycle of vengeance that has consumed your existence for centuries." Malloran's eyes widened in sudden understanding. "No," he gasped. "Not oblivion." "Not oblivion," Seraphina corrected softly. "Release. Return to the natural cycle you abandoned centuries ago. Freedom from the hatred that has defined your existence for so long." Before Malloran could protest further, multicolored light enveloped his form, penetrating to his essence. For a moment, brief but significant, something like peace crossed his ancient features. Then his physical form dissolved completely, not into violet energy as before, but into pure white light that rose toward the temple ceiling before dissipating entirely. Silence fell across the chamber, broken only by Roland's labored breathing, as the counselor remained paralyzed by Malloran's final attack. Outside, the sounds of battle gradually quieted as word spread that something momentous had occurred within the temple. Magnus approached slowly, still carrying the wolf crown in his hands. "You didn't destroy him," he observed. "You freed him." "Destruction would only have continued the cycle," Seraphina explained, rising to her feet. "His essence needed release, not elimination. Even after centuries of darkness, some spark of his original nature remained, buried beneath vengeance and hatred, but not entirely extinguished." Storm moved to her side, the Ancient One's green eyes reflecting approval of her choice. Through their connection, Seraphina sensed his understanding of the deeper principles at work, that true balance required compassion as well as justice, mercy alongside strength. "And now?" Magnus asked, looking down at the crown in his hands. "What becomes of this?" Seraphina studied this wolf crown thoughtfully. "It requires reformation, just as the heart requires completion. Both artifacts were twisted from their original purpose, the crown by generations of alpha dominance culminating in Malloran's curse, the heart by its fragmentation and separation. Can they be restored?" "I believe so," Seraphina said. "Not to their exact original forms, but to something that honors their true purpose, balance and harmony between different aspects of power." She extended her hand toward the crown. "May I?" Magnus hesitated only briefly before placing the ancient artifact in her palm. The 7 wolf heads no longer seemed malevolent, their ruby eyes clear rather than blood red, yet power still radiated from the black metal. The 7 alpha spirits remained bound within. Seraphina brought the crown close to the nearly complete heart at her throat. As the artifacts neared each other, both began to pulse in perfect synchronization, the heart cycling through 6 distinct colors, the crown's ruby eyes matching each shift. "They recognize each other," Seraphina said, wonder in her voice. After centuries of separation and corruption, they remember their original connection. "What happens now?" Magnus asked. Before Seraphina could answer, the temple doors burst open again. Luna entered, her massive silver form leading a procession of ancient ones. Behind them came Martha, supported by Captain Thorne, and the other freed captives who had apparently decided to return rather than flee. They sensed something significant had occurred, Martha explained, her voice stronger than before. The ancient ones insisted on witnessing what follows. Luna approached, green eyes fixed on the artifacts in Seraphina's possession. The silver female made a series of soft sounds that Storm translated through his connection to Seraphina. "Luna says the time has come to restore what was broken," Seraphina relayed, "that this moment was foretold in Ancient One prophecy, when heart and crown would meet again under blood moon, either to seal darkness permanently or to restore light to the world." "And which outcome awaits us?" Magnus asked. "That depends on choices made here and now," Seraphina replied. "Specifically your choice, Magnus." She held out the wolf crown, offering it back to him. "For 2 centuries you've worn this crown not by choice but by curse. Now the binding has been harmonized, not broken. You could remove it permanently, walk away from the burden you've carried for so long." Magnus stared at the offered crown, centuries of complex emotions crossing his features. "And the kingdom? The land itself responds to the crown's nature, without a wearer. The 7 alpha spirits would eventually dissipate, returning to the natural cycle they were removed from," Seraphina explained. "The land would heal, but slowly, over generations rather than immediately." "And if I choose to wear it again, this time by choice rather than curse?" "Then we complete what was begun centuries ago," Seraphina said. "The restoration of balance between Alpha and Soul Keeper, between crown and heart. You would rule not in isolation but in partnership. The land would heal more quickly, the kingdom reunite under shared purpose rather than fear." Magnus's golden eyes met hers directly. "And you, Seraphina, what becomes of a soul keeper when balance is restored?" The nearly complete heart pulsed at her throat, knowledge flowing from its collective wisdom. "I would stand as your counterpart, not subject, not ruler, but equal partner in maintaining balance. The heart and crown were always meant to work in harmony, each enhancing the other's strengths while mitigating weaknesses." "And if that partnership extended beyond mere artifacts and titles?" Magnus asked, his voice softening slightly. "If the connection that has grown between us these past days were acknowledged rather than denied?" Heat rose to Seraphina's cheeks, but she met his gaze steadily. "Then we would write a new chapter in an ancient story, one where Alpha and Soul Keeper choose partnership in all things, not because prophecy demands it, but because we desire it ourselves." For several heartbeats, Magnus stood silent, weighing choices denied him for centuries. Then, with deliberate movements, he took the crown from Seraphina's hands and placed it upon his brow. This time, no pain accompanied the action. The 7 wolf heads settled naturally against his skin, the ruby eyes glowing with clear light rather than malevolent fire. The 7 alpha spirits within, while still distinct consciousnesses, no longer fought for dominance but aligned in common purpose. "I choose to continue," Magnus declared, his voice carrying the authority of 4 centuries. "Not from obligation or curse, but from free will and clear purpose. This kingdom deserves healing after generations of slow decline." He extended his hand to Seraphina. "And I choose partnership, if you are willing. Alpha and Soul Keeper, king and queen, man and woman, equal in all things." Seraphina placed her hand in his without hesitation. The moment their fingers intertwined, the nearly complete heart and reformed crown responded in perfect harmony, multicolored light radiating outward from both artifacts to fill the temple chamber. The wave of energy continued beyond the temple walls, spreading throughout the city, across the withered fields surrounding Northcrest Castle, through forests and mountains to the kingdom's furthest borders. Everywhere it touched, balance began to restore itself, trees standing straighter, grass greening, rivers running clearer. Within the temple, Luna threw back her massive head and howled, a sound of triumph and acknowledgement. The other ancient ones joined her, their voices rising in a chorus that celebrated what humans and wolves alike recognized as a turning point in their shared history. "It is done," Martha whispered, tears streaming down her weathered cheeks. "What your mother foresaw, what she protected you for all those years ago, the cycle broken, the balance restored. Not completely, Seraphina demurred, touching the heart at her throat. One fragment remains separated, the amethyst beyond the ice mountains. Until it joins its siblings, the restoration remains partial. A journey for another day, Magnus suggested, his golden eyes warm as they met hers. Perhaps our first as true partners. Captain Thorne stepped forward, kneeling before them both. Your Majesty, he addressed Magnus formally, then turned to Seraphina with equal respect. My queen, the battle is won. Roland's forces have surrendered or fled. The capital awaits your return to the castle. Rise, old friend, Magnus commanded gently. There has been enough kneeling today. From this moment forward, Northcrest enters a new era, one where strength and wisdom share equal footing, where balance replaces dominance as our guiding principle. Storm moved to Seraphina's side, the Ancient One's green eyes reflecting approval and something deeper, a sense of prophecy fulfilled, of ancient purpose achieved. Through their connection, she understood his intent. Storm and a contingent of Ancient Ones will remain with us, she explained to Magnus. Advisors and guardians as we rebuild what generations of imbalance have damaged. Luna will return to the heart of Shadowfall with the majority of their pack, maintaining their sacred charge as keepers of the old knowledge. And Roland? Thorne asked, gesturing toward the counselor who remained paralyzed on the temple floor, consciousness evident in his terrified eyes. Magnus considered the fallen counselor thoughtfully. Once, I would have ordered his immediate execution for treason. But perhaps new principles should begin with new justice. He looked to Seraphina. What would balance suggest in this case? Neither execution nor forgiveness, she replied after brief consideration, but rehabilitation and restitution. Let him work alongside the half-bloods in restoring the lands his moonstone mining operations devastated. Let him learn firsthand the consequences of his actions, and perhaps in time, find his own balance. Magnus nodded, approval evident in his expression. Wisdom to temper strength, justice with opportunity for redemption. Yes, this is the path forward. As dawn approached, they departed the temple together. Alpha King and Soul Keeper Queen, Ancient Ones and loyal guards, freed captives and reformed counselors. The city of Northcrest awaited, its citizens emerging cautiously to witness the transformation beginning around them. Trees long barren of leaves sprouted new green buds. Wells that had run nearly dry gurgled with fresh water. The very air seemed clearer, charged with potential rather than decay. And everywhere, people whispered of magic, of ancient prophecy fulfilled, of balance restored after generations of gradual decline. At the castle gates, Magnus paused, looking back at the path that had brought them here. From a chance encounter in Shadowfall Forest to partners in restoring the kingdom's heart and soul. Whatever comes after this moment, he said softly to Seraphina, I face it gladly with you beside me. As do I, she replied, the nearly complete heart pulsing gently at her throat. Not because prophecy demanded it, but because we chose it freely. Together they entered Northcrest Castle, Alpha and Soul Keeper. Strength and wisdom reunited after centuries of separation. The Wolf Crown and Soul Keeper's heart pulsed in perfect harmony, their light illuminating not just the immediate surroundings, but the path forward into a future where balance, not dominance, would guide the kingdom's destiny. And somewhere far beyond the ice mountains, the final fragment of the heart, the amethyst of the visionary lineage, pulsed in response to its siblings' call, waiting to complete what had begun this day. A journey for another time, another chapter in an ancient story now taking new form through choices freely made rather than prophecy blindly followed.